the meeting to order of the Davidson County Board of Commissioners. This is Tuesday, April the 14th, 2020, and it is now 6 o'clock. Debbie has told us that she will conduct the roll call for the meeting.
And we will do this alphabetically also. Of course, Commissioner Krotz.
Present, counted for.
Commissioner Elliott.
Present, counted for.
Commissioner McClure.
Yes.
Vice Chair Truill.
I'm here.
Commissioner Shell.
Here.
Commissioner Yates.
Here.
Chair Watford.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tonight, it's my pleasure to do the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance, and I think it will be okay tonight if we sit through the pledge. If you'll bow with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for forgiveness of our shortcomings and to praise and thank you for the blessings you provide for us daily. We ask that you comfort those families who have lost loved ones due to the pandemic we are experiencing, and that you give, as we speak, the medical workers courage to face the danger of their chosen fields. We know that you can and will provide encouragement for those who seek you. As we carry on the business of our county, we plead for wisdom in our decision-making. We also pray for those who have lost loved ones in the deadly storms of recent days.
Amen.
As we continue to follow the recommendations of our leaders to remain home, leave our jobs, and wait out a change in the conditions across the world, may we learn patience, appreciation of the simple things in life, and grow in kindness toward our fellow man. We know that you can and will provide encouragement for those. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'm hearing a feedback.
Does someone
Are y'all
have their
hearing
meeting
that?
up via the live stream?
Uh-huh.
Heard that come through the PA system just a minute ago during the prayer.
Okay.
And maybe if you're on speakerphone to pick up the phone. Okay, that sounds much
Do you
better.
think it's me?
I
Do you
no,
think it's me, Deb?
No, I think you're fine. It was but we are getting some feedback back through the speakers. I think if any of you have the live stream of the meeting up, if you could turn the volume on it completely down, because it is about a 10-second delay. Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Clerk Harris has contacted the Lexington Chamber and has asked them not to send representatives during the governor's stay-at-home order. In an effort to keep the meeting brief and to encourage social distancing, there will be no public address at this meeting. For the adoption of the agenda, I have several changes to present to you. First of all, Mr. Smith has asked that both agenda item 8E, if you'd like to turn to that, the final adjusting change order for culvert replacement project at Lexington Middle School, and agenda item 8F, the bid award for company police for Thomasville Government Center, be removed from the agenda. Mr. Fry has asked that the approval of the MOA between the North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts and the Sheriff's Office for Magistrate Video Project be added to the consent agenda as agenda item 8W. Commissioner Krotz has requested that, quote, we have a conversation regarding the letter from Gaston County, and that be added as agenda item 9A. Due to the expected length of the public hearing portion of the meeting, I'm requesting that the consent agenda be moved to before the public hearing.
So moved.
Are there any changes for the agenda?
Madam Chairman, I have a change. I would like to add a discussion about, COVID documentation and,
Okay,
for the board.
9B.
9B, that's correct.
that would be 9B. I have a motion. Do I have a second to adopt the agenda?
Second. Second,
Have
Commissioner
a
Crotts.
second? Thank you. Okay, will you please vote verbally for Ms. Harris?
Aye.
I'm gonna poll the board now that's on the phone, if that's okay. I got a yes
That's
from
fine.
Commissioner Crotts and a yes from Commissioner Elliott. Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Truul,
Yes.
from Commissioner Shell, Commissioner Yates,
Yes.
and Chair Watford.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Public address has been canceled for tonight, so we're going to go to item number A, the items for decision, information, and consent. Are there any items to remove from the consent agenda for discussion? If
Madam
not-
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as
I second. I have a motion and a second. Please vote verbally, and we'll do this again by roll call.
Commissioner Crotts,
Yes.
Commissioner Elliott,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Vice Chair Truul,
Yes.
Commissioner Shell,
Yes.
Commissioner Yates,
Yes.
and Chair Watford.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Debbie, you stay with me. I'm
I will.
moving on to public hearing. We have public hearing for Thomason Plastic Building Reuse Grant Closeout. I declare the public hearing open. Casey will lead this off, and he will introduce Michael Walser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got Michael Walser here. He's our grant administrator for all of our building reuse grants that we use here in the county, and this one's a closeout for one that was from back a few years ago for, I think, Thompson Plastics. I'm gonna let him walk us through kind of the background of that and what is the purpose of having the public hearing this evening.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. In 2015, the county was awarded a $750,000 grant for the Thompson Plastics Building Reuse Project. They located at 2018 East US Highway 64. In return for the grant, they were to provide a match of $750,000 and create 38 new jobs within 2 years, and then maintain those 38 jobs for an additional 3 years. They've asked for several extensions because they went on into the plant, and as their business grew, they continued to make improvements, and so we ended up getting extensions all the way through 5 years. At this point, they've spent a little less than $11,000 of the $750,000. They've matched that dollar for dollar. They're at 108 jobs now, so they certainly met and exceeded their 38 jobs, and certainly they've maintained those jobs. So this project was audited by the Department of Commerce back in 2016, and the county was found to be in compliance, and there were no findings or concerns. So the state has rescinded that little less than $11,000, and they've asked for this closeout public hearing to take place, and they asked for the county to submit the closeout package so they can close this out.
Okay, I'm confused. It says that they've received $739,000, so you're saying it was $11,000 they didn't receive, is that what you're saying?
That's right. Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah. Yes, sir.
But they've met everything, okay, never mind, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak either in favor of or in opposition to this request? Does Mr. Walter have any
Mr.
additional
Hill's gonna-
information that he would
Madam
like to
Chairman.
Madam
share?
Chairman, Mr. Hill wants to speak.
Okay, and you need to tell me, so I'll.
I understand, I
Thank
understand
you.
completely.
We weren't sure until he raised his hand.
Okay, thank you.
Most of the assertions in tonight's huge agenda packet are supported by documents. Why do you always make an exception for Michael Walzer? I don't really care whether this grant ever gets closed out. I am concentrating on keeping another one from getting opened up.
Do we have any other in favor of or opposition? Mr. Walter, do you have any additional information to share? If not, I declare the public hearing closed. May I have a motion and second to approve the closeout of Thompson Plastics Building Reuse Grant?
So moved.
Madam Chair, I'd like to hear from
Yes.
the county manager that, have you checked in, everything's as it's been presented?
Yes, sir, and then we've gone through, like he said, with the Department of Commerce. They audited the project and their findings are clear, so we're comfortable that this project's ready to close.
Thank you, sir.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Okay. I have a second. Please vote verbally.
Okay, Commissioner Krotz,
Yes.
Commissioner Elliott,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yeah.
Vice Chair Truill,
Yes.
Commissioner Shell,
Yes.
Commissioner Yates,
Yes.
and Chair Watford.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We'll move on to the road closure of the portion of the unnamed road in the Isle of Pines between Lot 61 and the office lot accessible from Lake Shore Avenue. And I'm going to call on Mr. Fry to lead us off on this.
Madam Chair, the board may remember this coming before the board last month, and at that time, both the petitioner and the opponents to this petition are represented by counsel, Mr. Berg from Lexington and Mr. McConnell from Greensboro. I've had the opportunity in the last month to speak with both of those attorneys. There is an expectation that when this is heard by the board, that it will be contested and it will be a lengthy hearing. And based upon the present circumstances and the limitations of the number of people that we can have present and participate in the hearing, the parties unanimously agreed to ask the Board of Commissioners tonight to table this hearing until that meeting on May 12th. Now, we have talked further about it being continued beyond May 12th with the expectation that we may still be having the same limitations on that date that we have tonight. But if that's the case, then we will come back to the board on May 12th and ask to find another date. It is my recommendation, and it is the agreement between the parties to place this on for hearing on May 12th.
Madam Chair,
I make that motion.
I'll second.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Shell.
I got a question.
Mm,
Could I ask a
Okay,
question?
please, that's Elliot. Sure.
What authority do we have to shut the boat ramps that are in use down until we find out actually who owns it, as the county, for a liability purpose? Because I got a picture of a truck inside the lake that's being used off of one of these boat ramps, and it's only a matter of time that liability gets tracked back to somebody. And, you know, if we're there for public safety to do that, I think we should seek that nobody uses it until we find out who owns it.
Commissioner Elliott, I'd be glad to speak with you about that. Because the representation that I made to council was that the only thing that we expected to talk about tonight was finding another date.
That's right.
with your permission,
I forgot never
with
mind.
your permission, I'd like to talk about that outside of this.
10-4. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Shell, did you have another question?
I was following Commissioner McClure's motion and second.
Okay, thank you, sir. I have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Commissioner Crotts?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Vice Chair Truul?
Yes.
Commissioner Shell?
Yes.
Commissioner Yates?
Yes.
Chair Watford?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fry.
Yes, ma'am.
We're going to move on to item number C, rezoning request by David B. Coe in Lexington Township containing 77.33 acres from RS-RA3 to mixed-use R. I declare the public hearing open, and Mr. Cornman will introduce the application. Mr. Coe, will you come forward and explain the request?
Okay, good evening, Commissioners. You do have a request by David B. Coe representing New Ventures Land Development at 3409 Union Grove Road in Winston-Salem. He's asking that the 77.33 acres, more or less, in Lexington Township, tax map 331, lot 20, to be rezoned from RS Low Intensity Residential District to that of RA3 Rural Agricultural District to that of MXR Mixed Use Residential District. The property is located on the northeast corner of B. Sicker Road and West Center Street Extension. At that intersection, the address of the property officially is 122 Webb Road, which comes off of West Center Street Extension. The Davidson County Planning Board met on April the 7th to consider this application. It was their recommendation 5-0 to recommend approval of the request as it was presented to the board. Mr. Coe is here tonight, but just to quickly introduce what he's asking for. The name of the proposed residential development is Dolcetto, Dolcetto, and it is for a total of, let me see here. Trying to see how many. 119 lots on this 77.33 acre tract. Mr. Coe is here and he's ready to make a presentation to the board on this application.
Good evening, Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. As Guy has well stated, this is a proposed MXR rezoning for a planned development of 119 lots. Particularly like this design, we've got a large contiguous common area, as you can see on the site plan, both to the north and east, as well as the south and the east.
Mr.
Yes.
Make a presentation.
Let us get to the site plan, please. We'll find it in the information. So,
Is there a reason we
one
lost
fif-
Mr. Coe?
no, we're trying to get the site plan for y'all.
I've quit speaking, sir. They're trying to get the site plan up on the
115.
screen.
Okay, we're good. You're good to go.
Everybody have the screen now?
We do.
Okay, very good. Large common area to the north and east, as well as on the southeast side. Two access points as DOT and fire like for subdivisions this size. Site is served by City of Lexington Sewer and City of Lexington Water, and we have spoken with them. They've agreed to provide services. And we've also interacted with NCDOT. We're in the process of, we'll continue to act further contingent upon approval tonight to discuss what type and where of road improvements they will want due to the number of lots, and we'll certainly cooperate with them to give them what they ask. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
What is the median price point?
Mr. Crotts, the price point, this is the same product that went in the subdivision called Sunnyvale, and prior to that, Wilkes Creek. They go from, I think, about 185 up to about 240, depending on the site, the house that's chosen.
Okay, do you have something in the, deed restrictions that prevents somebody from, using this as, not right away, of course, but on down the road as, investment property?
Yes.
There is.
These are intended for single-family, residences to be owned individually. Of course, you usually make a provision for someone to be able to rent for a short period of time. Typically, it's about a year, because they may, move and do a new home in a different town and rent for a few months. But, we do put it in our restrictive covenants that these are not to be purchased as rental units.
Very good.
I'm good with that.
No further questions.
Is that fall?
What school zone is this, Mr. Coe?
Sir, I plead ignorance. I'll let Mr. Corman answer that.
I'm not sure, Todd. I would think that it would be North Davidson High School, but I'm not sure of the elementary school.
Okay.
It's right, on the northwest side of Lexington. It is not in the city, it is in the county, obviously, by the fact that I'm here, but it does join the city on the north side. The common area joins city zoning, city limits.
I'm sure this has been asked or answered, but all of the, roadways in there are gonna be, state maintained?
Correct. All roads will be built to NCDOT standards for future adoption, sir.
Right.
And they all lead to Raleigh, right?
I'm sorry, Mr. Crotts.
Making a reference to Rome.
Oh, yes, sir.
What fire district is it under?
I have not researched
That would be
Mr.
West
Chair.
Lexington.
West Lexington? I didn't know if it was base two, what is that, 3, Lexington base 3?
That's a city fire, but this is out in the county, so I'm sure they have mutual aid with.
Yeah.
Anybody know what our capacity is at North Davidson?
I don't know what it is now that we've built Oak Grove.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where we're at.
And I'm just a little concerned about our capacity there, but, I'll be okay here, but it's something we need to look at in the future.
Well, we did send a notice of the meeting and the information that we send, all of these to the schools for comment, but we did not receive anything from them.
You did.
Okay.
Mr. Coe, in response to the question that, Commissioner Crotts asked with regard to the provision in the restrictions about investment property, can you direct me to where that's located?
I'm not sure about the others. I'm telling him we will on this one. I have not studied those restrictive covenants, in excess, but if they're not in there, I will make sure it goes in there.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm not disputing your statement. I'm just not able to find it.
No, I'm not intimately familiar with it, and I'm not saying that you're looking at it right now, but if it needs to be added, it will be before it's recorded. I have spoken so, and I will make sure that happens.
Yeah, Mr. Coe, you know, in the real estate market, when Keystone Homes or different groups, even over here at Children's Vineyards, it's great and wonderful for a while, but then when the price market goes down, because maybe we've had a couple foreclosures, then somebody goes in and buys it as an investment property, then they get tenants in it, and then it brings the other properties around them because the value's down because everybody wants to sell them. That's why I was asking.
I fully understand the question, and I fully understand Mr. Fry's statement. That may not be in the sample copy I turned in, and we are not engaging in contract zoning. I take your suggestion as a good one for our good as well as that of the county, and that will go in the ones that are recorded, and this is live testimony.
Very good, Mr. Coe.
Yeah.
If we ever look at changing MXR zoning, I think that should be part of the requirement of MXR, and that way everybody meets the same standard. But I think every development should have that, but that's just my opinion. But anyway, thank you, sir. And I do agree with you. Even if it's not in there, you're saying, hey, I like the idea. I'll put it in there.
That is a good suggestion that I agree to and we will do. And
Yes,
of
sir.
course, these are samples, but they can be, they're not, the subdivision doesn't exist yet, so they're not recorded yet, but that can and will be put in them.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Thank you.
Any additional questions for the board?
I have one mostly directed to
Okay,
Mr.
sure.
Crotts. When you're looking at okaying this, is there any way that, real estate, that's your avenue?
Yes, sir.
And, is there any way we can look at approving this with the stipulation that it has that included, that your concern included?
We've done it before, and so far, which I don't know where they're at on the one on, was it Hampton Road? Was it Hampton Road? What's the one that was the huge track?
Hagee Road?
Hagee Road, yeah, I'm sorry, not Hampton. I think y'all have broken ground, but y'all haven't done anything with it yet, but, we've talked about them before, and they've agreed to put them in there. And it's on public record that they've agreed to put it in there.
I have memory of that meeting. Mr. Lyons is the developer on that. I was here. I helped him represent that. That was brought up and he did agree to that, and I would testify to that in any court because it's the truth.
Absolutely. So, that's why I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I trust Mr. Coe, and I know that if he says he'll do it, plus it's a public hearing, it is recorded, that they agreed to do that.
How about you, Guy?
I'm fine with that. The board has some, leeway in anything that you feel necessary that you want to include, as long as the.
Just include it in the motion and it's done.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what.
That's good.
I was saying, yeah.
Yeah.
We just included in
Okay.
the motion, okay. You okay with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Any other questions by the board? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak either in favor of or opposition to this request?
Barney does.
Barney W. Hill is coming to the microphone.
Thank you.
Mr. Hill, it might be easier if you did not touch the microphone.
I didn't. I purposely avoided it. Try page 54 for the restrictions.
Thank you.
Let the record reflect that I am expediting the proceedings by addressing agenda items 7 Charlie, 7 Delta, and 7 Echo at the same time. Although the 3 mixed-use rezoning requests are titled differently, it is no secret that they constitute a single package conceived by Mr. Coe. I fear the text amendment that brought density with open space prepared the way. It is uncontested that all 3 projects are compliant with that amendment. Mr. Corman, who has been involved in this process from the beginning, suddenly brought up the ancient history of the potential Duracell contamination. Mr. Coe explained that Mr. Inabinet, possibly the leading authority on the Duracell situation, confirms that there are no clouds hanging over the property. Then Mr. Cornman argued that a portion of the property, and we're talking about properties, the 3 requests, should remain reserved for economic development. Mr. Reed, who will be introduced in the second public hearing, chased that chimera for 5 years. And he insists that the future use will be residential or nothing. That's all the market will support. I fear that Mr. Coe has conceded too much already. The penalty will be paid by prospective first-time homeowners. I wish I could see what Mr. Coe would build if unconstrained by words imposed on him by others. I think that might be a place I'd want to live. I urge an affirmative vote on each of the 3 requests, and this is the last you'll hear from me on this tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Does anyone else wish to speak either in favor or opposition to this request? Mr. Coe, do you have any additional information you'd like to share?
I do not. This particular rezoning was unopposed by the planning board, and I respectfully request that you approve it tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cornman, what's the staff recommendation for this request?
Yes, ma'am. I will tell the board also that the development did go through a technical review with our partners that provide services to the proposed site, that being the Davidson Water and also DOT. They have looked at this and have been working directly with the developer and his engineers to make sure that everything will be in compliance with the rules and regulations that are in place. The applicant is seeking to have rezoned a parcel land containing 77.33 acres, more or less. Properties requested change from RS, low intensity, to RA3 and RA3 Rural Agricultural District to that of MXR, Mixed Use Residential District. The property is located in Lexington Township on the northeast corner of B. Sicker Road and West Center Street Extension. According to the site plan submitted, a total of 119 home sites are being planned for, with construction on lots with a minimum of 65 feet of lot width. Under the current zoning, a maximum of 232 dwelling units could potentially be built. But he's only asking for 119. All home sites will be served with both public water and public sewer by the city of Lexington. And roads accessing all lots will be designed and constructed to meet the NCDOT minimum standards so that the roads can ultimately be added to the state secondary road system when petitioned. The existing public roads, B. Sicker Road and West Center Street Extension, are both classified as collector roads. They're paved, state maintained, with current sufficient carrying capacity to accommodate the anticipated traffic generation from this particular development. The proposed development appears to be reasonable and consistent with the comprehensive plan for the area. There are other mixed-use residential areas in close proximity, one being the vineyards off of Forest Hill Road. The land development plan encourages higher density residential development to occur in areas closer to the urbanized area where goods and services are present to support the residents choosing to live in the new development. Policies 6.12, 6.6, 6.7, and 6.10 all provide support to the proposed rezoning from RS and RA3 to that of MXR district. For these reasons, staff will recommend approval of the application as it's been presented.
Any further discussion from the board? I declare the public hearing closed. May I have a motion and second to either approve or deny this rezoning request and adopt the resolution on statement of consistency.
Madam
Motion made.
Madam Chairwoman, I would like to make a motion that we, pass this, or accept and pass. Golly, I've totally messed up what I was gonna say. The statement of consistency and this resolution in front of us, pending that they also include restrictions on the deed that would only allow for temporary leasing of properties in this, 119-unit housing complex.
Okay. So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
The attorney.
Second.
We got, our county attorney making,
Madam Chair, I apologize, but I wanted to ask Commissioner Krotz whether he would require that restriction to be placed on the face of the deed or simply to be included within the declaration of
The declaration.
the property.
Yes, I amend it to make it the declaration, not the actual face of the deed. That would be where it would need to be anyway.
I think that was the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
you reviewed the, page 54, as, Mr. Hill suggested?
I have not found it yet. No,
Yeah, I just looked at it, it may.
We can't hear
may
any
be
of that
concerned about,
conversation.
May already be in there.
Commissioner Shell, could you move up towards your mic? I don't think they can hear you.
I didn't want anybody hearing me.
This is Mr. Coe. The discussion here with the county attorney, some of the other members, that Mr. Hill brought up is that language already may be on page 54.
On page 54,
We'll
and I was
review
just
that
reading
and,
it. Mhm.
and make sure it's amenable.
Sir.
Okay, I got a question for Mr. Fry, please. And I don't know what it says in the, bylaws or whatever, but temporary doesn't work for me, rental. If you're gonna do some of that nature, temporary to some people may be a year, some may be 6 months, so if you're gonna put any wording in there as far as, prohibiting rental, then it should be, a time limit set on it. And, no consecutive rentals. They could move one crew out and somebody else in, so it'd be temporary for the second dwellers.
Mr. Yates, that's the spirit of what I heard when Mr. Krotz first brought it up, and I concur.
Okay, all right.
All right, I have a motion, and I believe I heard a second from Mr. McClure. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, please vote verbally.
Okay. Commissioner Krotz,
Yes.
Commissioner Elliott,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Truul. Vice Chairman Truul, yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. I could hear you that time. Commissioner Shell,
Yes.
Commissioner Yates,
Yes.
Chair Watford.
Yes. All right, we're going to move on to a rezoning request by J. Chris Reed in Lexington Township containing 28.09 acres from RA3HI to MXR. I declare the public hearing open, and Mr. Kornman will introduce the application.
Sure.
Mr. Coe, if you will also come forward again and explain the request.
All right,
Since I'm not, maybe others in addition.
okay. You do have a request by J. Chris Reed to rezone property in Lexington Township, tax map 334, lots 21A and 21B, containing a total of 28.09 acres, more or less. Property is located on the north side of the East US Highway 64, approximately 0.56 of a mile east of the North Main Street intersection. Rezoning is requested to change from RA3 and HI Heavy Industrial District to that of MXR Mixed Use Residential District. The planning board met on this on April the 7th. Their recommendation was 3-2 to recommend approval of the application as it was presented. Again, you have the property on your map that's highlighted in yellow. The, shaded lots 20 and 21.
Give us a second to find those maps.
Okay.
Chuck,
Sir.
it was page
Zoning
58,
map.
and it's not in there. It was talking that you can lease it, but it's on the last page of that one.
Thank you, I could not
This
find
map,
it. I appreciate the
Yes,
reference.
sir.
It's the zoning map. There you
page
go.
163, Joel.
Okay, I think what we're looking at is the zoning map that was prepared by staff, and I was pointing out that the, lots 21 and 29 are shaded in blue, and that indicates that they're, under the city of Lexington's zoning jurisdiction. They're inside the city limits. And I would tell the board that those two parcels are both zoned, I, which is industrial. Of course, that was the former site of Duracell, and also where, Mr. Reed, had his warehousing and distribution for his, candy factory on lot 21. Mr. Coe is here, to discuss, the request tonight. And again, this is a residential development, and you may want to, Madam Clerk, if you want to go to the site plan. Okay, page 160, and as you can see, it is a total, I believe, of, let's see, 71 lots that are being included in this request. It will have a entrance off of US Highway 64, and the developer and his engineers have been working with DOT for the driveway entrance approval. There is a letter also in the file from the city of Lexington in reference to the provision of public water and public sewer to the site. I think they have been working with an adjoining property owner to get an easement across their property to bring in the sewer, but I'll let Mr. Coe explain that.
Again, thank you for letting me be here tonight, and for those that are not present on Zoom, you're disadvantaged. The only members of the public, aside from elected officials and county employees in the room tonight are myself, Mr. Reed, the petitioner, and Attorney David Inhabitant. One thing that Mr. Hill presumed, which was not entirely correct, was I did not know who Mr. Reed was until this rezoning amendment or text amendment was going through the process. It was in process, and I met him during the process. So aside from that, I defer to his comments. Mr. Reed, did you start the candy company? You bought it? Okay. 120 years ago. Okay, 120 years ago, the candy company was started, but I had eaten his candy, but I did not know who he was. He approached me. He's owned this property for, Mr. Reed, 5 years. During that time, for the last 4 years, he has aggressively marketed this property as a commercial site with two different good quality commercial real estate firms. He has had absolutely no offers whatsoever, not even what we call lowball or fishing expeditions, no interest whatsoever. He conceived the idea on his own of developing this residentially, feeling that that was the highest and best use, and approached me to help him develop a site plan which would be in compliance with the underway text amendment, which I have done. He has coordinated with NCDOT to get the driveway permit, at least to the point of the access point is approved by NCDOT. Public water is available, public sewer is available. We had a little bit of a scare in the design process. We went to Procter & Gamble, who now owns the Duracell property, has control over it, and asked for about a 200-foot sewer easement adjacent to the railroad right-of-way, which is on the southeastern side of the site plan that you see, to go back to the main outfall that flows down the creek. We were initially denied. Mr. Green, a local surveyor, did a survey of this site several years ago, and upon referencing his survey, we noticed that he had discovered an existing sewer easement, which all parties have agreed, everyone who's looked at it agrees gives us sewer access across the Procter & Gamble, AKA Duracell property, which is some 600, maybe 700 feet in length. And I believe Mr. Abbott would tell me that we're close to reaching an agreement to swap the long one for the short one because it's less injurious to their property. So we do have sewer access, we do have public water. To speak to a couple of issues, staff recommended against the rezoning based, I think, largely upon the area plan, as we call it. Is that the right terminology, Guy? You call it a?
It's, the land development plan.
Land development plan or area plan, which has that as a growth corridor through there. And not to disagree that that is what the plan shows, and not to disagree with the staff that, they need to normally recommend as the plan shows. We, the county, have gone down here off of 85 and developed a very successful industrial area. Eggers down there spending hundreds of millions of dollars. I believe it's going to approach $1 billion by the time they're done. Their foresters came and spoke to my group of foresters. I'm also a forester as well as a surveyor, and told us the real numbers of what they're spending and what they've actually. It's getting close to $1 billion, and we all know and believe that that is going to drive proximate location of other businesses. So not that this is not a potential area for industrial and commercial development, but we've overshadowed it ourselves by the creation of that one. And I would simply put forth for tonight's discussion and consideration that this area, while we may not want to revise the management plan or the growth plan or the area, what's our right terminology? I'm used to using area plan.
Land development.
The land development plan, well, we may not want to revise that. It might be that this area is well suited to a mix of uses that include both residential and commercial and industrial. The highest and best use of any tract is what we seek. And it's my client's contention that this site, he marketed it commercially, failed to do so. He wishes to convert it to money. That's what he bought it as an investment. He's in the candy business, had the warehouse next door to it. He feels this is the highest and best use. He has a potential buyer for these sites, and he wishes to develop it this way. The issue of potential environmental contamination was brought up at the last meeting. I believe it was brought up by Mr. Fry, not Mr. Cornman. I testified that it was my knowledge there was no environmental contamination, that Mr. Abbott found nothing in the title record to indicate that. I'm going to let him come up and address that now, since it has come up in tonight's meeting, brought up by Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Coe, and appreciate you all hearing us this evening. I'll just speak to that briefly. Have been involved in this property for, I guess, going back maybe 10 plus years. And the title would reveal there's never been any environmental restrictions on these particular parcels. There was at one time a restrictive covenant on parcel 21, which is where the warehouse is that the Piedmont Candy Distribution Center is located. Those were removed back in 2018. All of the testing was done to reveal there were no longer any hazards on lot 21, and so through the Department of Health and Human Services, they consented to release the restrictions on that particular parcel. Again, not one of the two that are before you tonight, but that is one that is adjacent that at one time did have those restrictions, which have now been removed.
Madam Chair, with your permission, while Mr. Abbott is at the microphone, may I follow up with some questions on that?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nabonette, you have, could we return to the GIS map? You made reference a moment ago, sir, to Lot 21. That originally was subject to the declaration of restrictive covenants, which, among other things, declared the property to be part of the Battery Tech Superfund site.
That's correct.
And Lot 29, which adjoins the northwestern corner of your site, is also part of the Duracell Superfund site?
That's correct. Both of those were contained in those covenants that I believe were put on record in 2002.
And Lot 29 has not been released from the restrictive covenants, which declared several tracts out there to be part of the Superfund site?
That's right. 29 was not released, but 21, where Mr. Reed's distribution warehouse is located, those restrictions were released.
As part of the agreement that was entered into between Duracell, the state, and the federal government, there was a requirement for monitoring to be done on these properties for a certain number of years?
That's my understanding, which no longer is occurring on Lot 21, but I believe it probably is still occurring on 29, but I cannot speak to that from personal knowledge.
And as part of that monitoring process, there were test wells that were both on the Superfund site and on neighboring properties?
There were wells contained on several of the parcels. I don't recall and can't testify from personal knowledge about any wells that were on the parcels, were ever placed on the parcels that are before the board tonight.
Thank you, sir. That was the question I was leading to. Are there wells that your client is aware of, or were there wells that existed on either of the tracts for which your client is seeking this rezoning?
And I can let my client speak to that. I don't know whether they are actively being tested, but there may be several old wells that are subject to being removed at this point if they're no longer subject to testing. But I'll let Mr. Reed maybe speak to that.
I appreciate your help.
Yeah. Yes, there was 3 monitoring wells on this piece of property, and I spoke to ERM as the company that's been handling everything from Procter & Gamble. Talked to Phil Plady last week, and there's 3 that they don't even use anymore. They don't even know why they're still on there. Nobody's told them to get them. And I said, here's what I'm doing. I sent them the site plan. They said they don't have a problem with anything. In fact, they're the ones that's helping us seek the closer sewer easement. And they said, all you gotta do is give me the word and they'll take them out. So.
Thank you. That may not have been consistent with the statement that was made before the planning board, and I just wanted to get the clarification on that. Thank you.
A little bit further to clarify, before the planning board, we said, was told I was aware of no contamination. So you're telling me there were wells on the property, but this is fairly customary where there's contamination to put wells on adjacent properties to seek for contamination, but that's not been found on this property. So it's been looked at by environmental. So you'd say that's a correct statement? Correct. Okay. So it appears.
I got a question for you, Guy.
Yes, sir.
Or either Chuck, I misspoke, Chuck. What is the timeline on this, lot number 29? What is the duration of the testing? When does that expire?
David, do you have a knowledge of that?
I don't have any knowledge of when that expires. They are continuing to monitor it as far as every 5 years. They do a pretty extensive report, the Department of Health and Human Services.
I'm sorry, sir. Could you approach the microphone? I'm not sure our Zoom folks can hear.
My apologies. I'm aware that they are, receiving every 5 years a report, Procter & Gamble, from the Department of Health and Human Services, taking a look at what's there, but, as far as, any sunset or timeline of when that will expire, I don't think there's an expiration. I think it would be similar to what Mr. Reed, expressed, that at a point when the property owner, determines that there is, no longer any evidence and they seek approval, as we did for Lot 21, to have those restrictions removed, then that would be within the power of the Department of Health and Human Services if they felt all the, sign of any, contamination had been remedied.
Commissioner, I would agree. I would agree with
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Nabinett. On the face of the restrictive covenants itself, it does not have a sunset provision in there. I think it probably anticipated that it was going to be subject to further testing and modification at such time as it was found to be appropriate. Of particular concern within those restrictive covenants is language that says the land comprising the Duracell facility shall not be used for residential purposes. That was significant when the county at one time was looking at acquiring this property, goodness gracious, probably 10 or 11 years ago, and was probably the foundation for the county not considering acquiring the property.
And if I may, just for clarification, that is lots 21 and 29, because those are the two lots that the restrictions applied to. Are those the ones you're referring to?
That is correct. That is not the property for which Mr. Reed seeks the rezoning.
Correct. Yes, just want to make that clarification.
Well, one of the reasons I asked the question about lot number 29, how do we know, that those monitoring wells on 21A, has not just been overlooked? Do we have anything from the state showing that that's clear there and there's no further testing needed?
The ERM is the company that monitors it. I think they have people, out there every so often. But like I said, I spoke to them 3 times last week, sent them the plans. They said, I don't know why the wells are still there, because nobody's told us to remove them. We've not found anything there ever. And they just said, once, this was approved, just let them know and they would remove them. If there was any worry, they wouldn't remove them.
Well, I guess you'd have to have a letter from the state saying it was clear if there was ever monitoring wells on there.
Well, this property had never had any issues. Those were just put there, when Duracell owned it all, they just scattered them out here and there and everywhere. But there was never any issues on this property.
Whenever they were thinking about putting the jail out there at the Duracell, we had a lot of wells dug out there to test for contamination. But I don't recall whether 21A or 21B was included in that portion of property. Do you recall, Guy?
I don't, Mr. I don't remember that at all.
I don't know which ones we were looking at, but it was a big parcel. I'm sure that H1 was included, but I'm not sure about the back two. But we took a lot of wells and came up with nothing on 21 and 20B, 21A and 21B.
This is Brad, reapproaching. To clarify, I've dealt with some other environmental sites myself as surveyor, locating wells and also doing samples and turning them in and so forth. And it is usual and customary that you expand onto adjoining properties to seek the extents of contamination. But it is, I believe, a very reasonable assumption that had any contamination ever been found on this property, then we would know of it, because those restrictions, the documents that Mr. Fry has related to the adjacent properties would apply to this one had any contamination ever been found upon it.
Hey, Brad?
Mr. Yates, yes, sir.
I've had a little bit of experience in this as well. Now, in my experience, it's been a few years since I've messed with any property that it had any environmental impact on it. But usually, if they put the wells on the property, somebody's gotta have a copy of those testing results, and usually at the end, if they do not find any material, then you get a letter from the state clearing that piece of property. That's been my experience.
I understand. I'm gonna let Mr. Reed come up and speak because I just came in on all of this very recently.
Yeah, Mr.
Okay.
Yates, there was never anything on this property. So there's wells, I think there's some wells across 64. I mean, they scattered them out pretty, cast a wide net back however many years ago. But there is never, ever any covenants or anything found on this property. And in fact, the warehouse property where my candy distribution center's at, it had one restrictive covenant, and I went, did what was necessary to remove it because it really didn't pertain to that piece of property. It pertained to the one beside of it, but it was all linked together at that time, so.
And Mr. Yates, you are correct. If they were put in, someone tested them, and there should be data somewhere, but I have not pursued the
Right.
acquisition of that data.
Okay, like I say, I've been in that position before, and I've had to, and bought a piece of property that had wells on it, and I had to, go back and retrieve the data and get a letter from the state. Now, this has been about 10 years ago, saying that, everything's clear and clean.
Yeah, when I was talking, Mr. Yates, this is Chris again, when I was talking with ERM last week, they said they had no permission for the wells to be on there, and they don't really understand why they still are there. Nobody has told them to remove them. And, I said, I've owned the property.
Was this the original company that installed them? I mean, they could have come along later.
No, I think they've been involved, they've been involved since day one. The guy I talked to has worked with them he's worked with Procter & Gamble and Duracell for 20 years, he said. So, I think these were just there to, like I said, cast a net. And like when I talked to him, there was nothing, if there was anything there, it would have been on the deed, correct, David? It would have shown there was issues on the deed itself, and this deed has never had anything on it.
Chuck, just for clarification, when we're looking at these parcels of property here, were they always separated, or at one time was just one parcel of land and divided up later on?
I'm gonna ask for Mr. Inabinet's help with this, but at the time that we looked at the property, I believe there was a common owner to the property.
There was a common owner. It was originally the Bessie Swing family, if you go way back, and that's where all of this property came from. And in fact, there's still adjoining property that's belonging to many of her heirs. Going back to 2002, though, when the restrictive covenants were put on, at that time at least, these parcels were in their present format as far as the ones that were put under the restrictions. 21 and 29 were described by meets and bounds survey description, but they were distinct and separate in those restrictive covenants. So at least in 2002, when those restrictions first went on, those were separate from what's being requested as a zoning change for tonight.
I agree, Commissioner Shell, at the time that the county considered acquiring the property, approximately 10 years ago, the restrictive covenants encumbered only lots 29 and 21. And as Mr. Nabinet pointed out, they since have been released from lot 21.
And at no time going back to the 1950s forward were there ever any restrictions on any of the remaining swing farm that one time made up all of this property.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I would like to say that I appreciate the thorough discussion that we're having on this, because policy 6.4 of your land development plan states that the proposed residential development that would expose residents to the harmful effects of an incompatible development or to environmental hazards shall be prohibited. So I appreciate the due diligence on both sides to try to flesh this out to be sure that there's no environmental issues.
Mr. Reed, in order for them to remove the wells, you would have to get a letter from the state, is that correct?
I'm not sure, Mr. Crotts, the protocol. I just, Mr. Plady at ERM said, look, just give me a week or so to get it lined up. So I don't know what the protocol is for them to remove it, but he acted like it was no big deal for them to take them up.
I've had some removed before with commercial property that had, fuel tanks that leaked. I don't remember the process, this was 11 years ago. I remember there was a process, I remember we had to go through the state, but it was the environmental company I worked with that took care of that for me. But I do remember the fact that you couldn't just go out there and remove it without permission. And without documentation, and we had to retain that documentation. I want to say it was 10 or 15 years or something after we sold it. The next person had to have it. So I don't think you can go out there and put residential property out there, even if we rezoned it today, without having that done. I just don't see that happening. And I don't think you would take that liability yourself, or anybody, any of the developers would either, so, I don't see that being an issue.
Mr. Corman,
Yes, sir.
is this an asphalt plant close to there? Is that where,
Yeah, back in 2016, the Lot 11, which was rezoned by the board at that time to J.T. Russell and Sons, and they do have an intention to build a asphalt plant at some location on that track 11. The majority of the activities for that company now have been occurring on the south side of Valley Avenue. They do a lot of soils remediation, and you can see that on your aerial photography there, but it's somewhere in that area there. They're going to have plans for a asphalt plant.
I know that y'all would, obviously assume the liability of, not only do we have a train track coming through here with sound, but the sound that could happen at all night, with an asphalt plant.
Mr. Reed and I have discussed it. I'll speak to that, Mr. Elliott. I am familiar with the site you bring up. When J.T. Russell bought that site, I did not assist them with the facilitation of the rezoning, but I did do what we call an ALTA survey for them, which is a very detailed boundary survey with title work and so forth, and was then and am now aware of their plans. Upon discussing that, we do know there's a railroad track there, and some people may not want to purchase houses due to the sound created by the railroad track. However, the railroad track is very deep there, so you don't have a lateral sound movement. It has to come up out of the hole, so it is somewhat ameliorated, muffled in that manner. And also the asphalt plant, to speak to that issue, should it ever be built, should it become operational, our prevailing winds are from the west-southwest, so they would not carry any odors which might occur towards these properties most of the time. That's the prevailing winds, not
all the time.
Not all the time, but that is the normal winds. So
that was my concern.
We did discuss that, and Mr. Reed could say this himself, but I'm just repeating what he said to me. He said, well, it's my risk as a developer.
It is.
I'm not
wanting to bring it up.
What we're here for is to protect the public from Mr. Reed, not Mr. Reed from the public. And we, he knows that could possibly be an issue before this was built out and sold and complete, but he's willing to assume that risk, again, believing that's the proposal tonight is the highest and best use for his property. Is that what you would say, sir?
It is a half a mile. We measured it to half a mile.
Good deal. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak either in favor of or in opposition to this request?
And Madam Chair, I will make sure to note Mr. Hill's remarks in this public hearing as well.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else there? Gentlemen, do you all have any additional information to add or to clarify? And to our board members, do you have any additional questions?
No, ma'am.
In reading the minutes of the zoning board, there was quite a bit of discussion. It was split 3-2, I guess. And both the chairman and the assistant chairman voted against that. I was curious if what reasons they gave to vote for and against it. The planning staff said that they were not for it, and it is in an industrial corridor. I was just wondering what the reasons were that they gave to put that there.
In their resolution of consistency, Mr. McClure, it was cited that there would be public water and public sewer provided by the city of Lexington, and that it would be in close proximity to urban services for potential property owners to be able to take advantage of, and to promote affordable housing, where they've cited a strong demand for single-family homes in the particular cost range that they're proposing to build out here. And that's what they based on, but I'll let Mr. Coe, if he needed to.
Yeah, I never really did a summary. We got off on the environmental issue, which was good, because I think we all understand where we're at now, and we've done our duty to pursue that. The tract is currently, I haven't measured the area, visually it looks like 60% residential, 40% HI right now, these two parcels together. So we're not asking to move the entirety of it from HI to residential. We're asking to move about 40% from HI to residential, and the remaining 60% from a lower residential to a slightly higher residential. So we do feel that we meet certain criteria that Mr. Corman already alluded to of the development ordinance, which encourages this type of development to occur where services are available and in proximity to arterial roads, collector roads, and shopping areas and other services that people can use. And it certainly is. We know where it is. It's just out Highway 64 from this building we're at tonight. It is very proximate to downtown, very proximate. So certain parts of the development ordinance, we do meet very much the suggestions and the requirements of it. And the entirety of the property, of course, I don't know how deep your corridor is, Guy. Your corridor may only include the road frontage portion.
Well, it's not parcel specific, but it does cover both sides of 64, generally 600 feet or so on both.
One last comment, and I'll just answer questions. The portion that's currently zoned HI, the last part of our development ordinance, uses and regulation zoning districts, HI says that normally this district shall not be located directly adjacent to residentially zoned land. Well, it already is. So we're asking for what is normally a fairly easy rezoning, which is to downgrade the zoning. I think our only stumbling block here is the development plan, which I've already spoken about earlier, and I don't want to drag the meeting out, but I think we are proposing something that's not incompatible with that.
One last question for me, Mr. Reed. I don't know if you were in here before, but on the previous MXR zoning, we had spoken about deed restrictions.
Yeah, I heard you outside.
Are you good with that?
Absolutely. Whatever you agree, or
Okay.
we'll make sure to do the same thing.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Hey, Brad.
Mr. Yates, yes, sir. I'm walking back up. I'm here.
You
sir.
know, you do a really good job, and I'm a pro-business guy, and I like for anybody to invest their money the way they'd want to invest it. But, you know, this one right here, this one's tough for me. You got the HI, you got the asphalt plant right across coming up. They got trucks coming in and out of there 7 days a week, all night long. you got a site over here with some contamination on it that I nobody's proved to me yet, you know, that it's, well, I know it's not released. I don't know what kind of effects that could have for this 21A. And the reason I say that, you know what happens to us 6 months down the road, a year down the road, or 5 years down the road, when people find out that there's a site under remediation next to theirs. So I've tried to listen a good bit tonight, and I've tried to see if I could get my mind swayed a little bit, but, you know, so far, that hadn't been done. So I just wanted to give you that one last chance to try, but I don't like what I see here.
Yeah, this is
Madam
Chris.
Chair?
This is Chris again, just a
Yes,
little.
sir.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a little bit of background. Brad touched on it a little bit. I bought this property 5 years ago, and I just really wanted the warehouse part for the candy plant. So that right after I bought it, I went to Steve Gooch and said, hey, you know, if anybody's looking for some property, I've got it to sell. So he was aware of it. And then over 3 years ago, I turned it over to Ron Evans. In fact, the old sign is still laying to the left of the driveway at this property now, and he marketed it for 2 years, like Brad said, never had offer. So then 14 months ago, I gave it a Triad commercial, you know, got a bigger footprint, and they had it for over a year and never had any interest in it as well. I met with Craig Goodson 14 or 15 months ago, made him aware of it, which, you know, he's steering it to the business park, which I would too. And 14 months ago, I met with Tara Green as well, just to let the city aware of it. So I think I've did everything possible. So that's why I came up, you know, wanting to do the development. The topography on this piece of property doesn't even lend itself to commercial unless, I mean, I know Mr. Yates, you're in Graydon, that it would be a tremendous feat to put some industrial buildings on this piece of property the way it sits. And the only use is to do these pad style houses where we could step it down to utilize the existing topography. But I just wanted to.
And Chris, I'm with you. I mean, you know, like I say, I'm pro-business, and I try to look at everything definitely with an open eye. But this one here's got everything working against it, in my opinion, when we see, you know, and I look at the same thing when somebody wants to put a commercial business in a residential area, you know, so it's a double-edged sword. And I'm with you there. I've got a piece of property that's been on the market for 18 years, and I hadn't even got an offer on it. So I'm with you there. We're trying to sell a piece of property.
Mr.
But anyhow, I'll keep my
Mr.
ears open
Yates,
until the end here.
Yeah, Mr.
Madam
Yates, you
Chair.
asked me to comment, and Chris spoke, well, so I'll just say this. I do agree with Mr. Reed that the topography is somewhat extreme for trying to create a large flat area such as is normally utilized by commercial uses. We can go in there and put streets at, 6% grade and step down paths from side to side and facilitate the residential development. And I will not argue with anyone and say that this site is ideal in all respects for the proposed use. That would not be a reasonable statement on my part. However, I do think Chris has pursued other uses, and he considers this to be the highest and best use for his party, and he's the one at risk here, not the public. And based upon that, I do respectfully ask that the board consider his request as agreeable and approve it. And I'll just close with that and answer questions only.
The zoning on the city property there, is it commercial as well?
It's industrial.
Industrial?
Yes, sir.
You know, my issue is with the industrial corridor. If we make exceptions every time somebody comes up, we don't have a zoning ordinance, and we don't have a land use plan. All we have is a land use suggestion. And I think that we ought to adhere pretty closely to our land use plan. And so far as I can see, It doesn't. And the justifications that they gave from the Planning and Zoning Board, it appears to me that that they used generalizations that would qualify this piece of property. I understand that the motion was made to deny this, and it failed because of a lack of a second. I just want to protect the industrial corridors, and I know how precedent works. I've been here long enough to know that when you zone one piece of property, the next guy wants it rezoned, it's hard to say, no, you can't do that.
I got another question right quick, Brad, and this don't really matter. This is between, Mr. Reed and DOT, but I'm really surprised that you could even get a deceleration lane in here. Plus, I seen your map, your land map a while ago showed the lots all the way to the road.
I'm gonna let Mr. Reed come up. He was present and met NCDOT on site, and I'll let him answer that for you, Mr. Yates, because I wasn't there that day. I only saw their email. So let Mr. Reed.
Right, and like I say, it's none of my business, but I'm just surprised that they're not gonna require you to have a acceleration and deceleration lane here, especially this close to the overpass of this bridge. And I'd hate for him to move this far along and then they come back and go, yeah, we can't get a deceleration lane in here, an acceleration lane. So maybe they're not gonna require him to have one, but I find that hard to believe right here.
Yes, Mr. Yates, that, we met with them and we've got the documentation. They're gonna make us put a flare, I think that's what they're called, a turn-in flare.
It's a right-in only flare was
right.
what they came up with, Mr. Yates.
Correct.
Okay.
But there's already a turning lane coming from the other direction to turn in the middle.
Well, but they usually make you have an acceleration lane too, especially on a, something like this piece of property with housing development. But anyhow, that's between you and DOT. I try not to dig into that, but.
Yeah, the city limit sign is just right by it and it goes to 35 pretty quick, so they're not coming out into full speed.
Okay.
Mr. Corman?
Yes,
May
ma'am.
I ask you a question? It seems that I recall in the minutes that you had a confliction in your determination of how you felt about this. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I understand the need for affordable housing, but that's, in appropriate places. But I had come to the conclusion that looking at I feel compelled to defend the land development plan as planning director, being that the corridor, we fought several battles out here on US Highway 64 with different rezoning requests. And to be consistent, I've always tried to defend the 64 corridor as being a corridor of economic opportunity, and that I would point to policies 1.5, which states that protect and obtain more acreage for future industrial parks. I know that we've put in a lot of investment out at Belmont Road, but I also know that the EDC and the county has always been looking for the future for other areas for industrial development to bring jobs to the county. And that I would point to policy 1.5 says also that economic development efforts should encourage the revitalization and reuse of currently unused or underutilized structure, sites, and infrastructure in appropriately located areas. And I would point to you that this site is on three sides, has heavy industrial and industrial on the city side there, and then across the property it's limited industrial. Now, we do have some leftover RA3 that was part of when the county first was zoned. We went 300 feet on the south side of 64, but that's just been what's been left over, and hasn't been zoned, industrial, but, it is there. You could make a good case to make that industrial. So, and I've always, have heard that once you introduce, residential zoning in close proximity to, industrial uses, it, companies tend to, shy away from having, residences right up on, beside their plants because they're concerned about the, noise and the odor complaints and that sort of thing that come along with, industrial uses.
Guy, I have a question for you.
Yes,
So, I've spoke to the negatives. I also wanna speak to a question that I have about the topography that he talked to. What kind of vetting do we do inside planning and zoning for areas that we have listed in industrial type area? Cause there's no doubt that Duracell was an industrial type plan, but when you go back and you have topography that might not be suited for the industrial type zoning, at what point in time do we look and we reevaluate those type of areas? Because if it would cost somebody an egregious amount of money to come in to flatten that type of land, it's really not feasible, and that's probably why we haven't had people knocking down our doors to get it. So I just want it on both sides. I wanna know kinda what we do as the county to look at that.
We look at whether or not infrastructure can be, provided to the property. In looking at the Belmont Road area, we certainly looked at the drainage area for Swearing Creek and the capacity to upgrade the, treatment facility for Lexington, and we knew that was the growth area, at that time. And the soil types, are really conducive. It's conducive for farming down in that area, but it's also really good for, supporting industrial development. I did talk to Mr. Goodson about this particular site, knowing that this, application was in process, and, he did talk to me about, potential for flex development on this property, for warehousing and distribution, type uses, for that. So, I felt like it, that we needed to try to protect what, corridors that we had, to preserve, our industrial corridor. So I felt like I needed to follow what the land development plan was recommending.
And for clarification, the planning board did vote in favor for the rezoning?
Rezoning 3-2.
10-4, thank you, sir.
Yes.
I got a question for Guy. This is true?
Yes, sir.
Behind this property, what's behind this property? I guess that's 9A.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure that I followed your question.
Now, behind this property, what's the property back there?
9A, did you say? That is.
It's 9A.
Yes, my understanding is that's owned by, Duracell as well. It's about 90 acres in there, I think. It's undeveloped, but it's, zoned RA3 just because it's just vacant forested land. I'm not sure what plans Duracell had for the property, but except for future expansion.
Oh, yeah, it was. I thought y'all said it wasn't.
So, let me ask you, so, did I hear that Procter & Gamble owned 29 and 29? So do you think possibly they own 9A as well?
Let me verify that.
They do, this is Brad, they do own 9A. I spoke earlier about the interaction of a sewer easement across that parcel. It is Procter & Gamble. 9A is Procter & Gamble. It is currently zoned RA3.
It's still listed on.
Hey, Brad, does Procter & Gamble own 29?
Mr. Abbott instructs me to say yes. I didn't look that one up, sir, but yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You have your,
Madam Chair.
adjoining property under list right in behind your, zoning map.
Oh, yeah, okay. Madam Chair,
Yes, sir, Ms. McClure.
just a note, and, Chris made the, notation that in the planning board, the vote was 3-3, and that was correct, but I would also like to note that both the chair and the vice chair voted against that. So if we're gonna use that as some kind of platform, I would like to know that the two folks that have the most experience voted against it rather than for it. The other thing that I keep looking at here is this is contiguous to nothing. And if that 9A is ever developed commercially here, you're gonna have this little piece of land that's got residential on it, that's gonna be enclosed by commercial. I'm not sure, I don't know the 9A, I haven't walked out there. I have walked out the 21B and 21A, because county was contemplating buying that for jail. But I'm kind of with Todd on that. I think that if you don't stick to the land development plan, you might as well not have one. Because the next time somebody comes up and wants to put a residential area next to an HI, what are we gonna tell them? You can't do it? They're gonna say, well, you did it. And we're hooked in there, and we don't have much choice about doing it. Because if we're ever sued and it goes to the next level, we will lose.
Commissioner.
Look, 9A is still Procter & Gamble. How do you get to that property? Where's the?
Are you asking me?
Mr. Trull, I can speak
Well, I'm
to that.
asking him.
I don't have a clue.
Well, they own
As I said, I did
29.
not walk that property.
They own
I've been
29,
letting
which
room know,
adjoins.
I'm asking.
Procter & Gamble owns 29, which is, adjacent to that 71 acre approximately parcel behind it.
That's the only way to access it, Mr. Evans.
To my knowledge. I don't know if there's another way. And if I may, because I don't think it really came up in our primary presentation, but we certainly acknowledge the industrial corridor. I think the uniqueness of this property is obvious because of the length of time we've been going through these issues. And one of the things we would put forward, if the commissioners would consider it, is the uniqueness of this as it relates to that corridor. As was mentioned already, this is the first property along 64 corridor that's in the county. So what's in blue is in Lexington City, and this is the very first parcel along that Highway 64 corridor that extends a number of miles out to Interstate 85. So it's not in the middle of your corridor. It's not in a location that has already built up a number of different industries and commercial uses. It's the very first one, and even the location of this is somewhat bounded or protected in that the railway is on one side and presents sort of what we would consider a boundary or a separation from the remainder of the corridor as it moves on down Highway 64 towards Interstate 85. So we would argue that despite the fact that you do have this general plan, and certainly we respect the fact that you feel like you need to follow that overall plan of development, that this site in particular is unique, being the first one along the corridor within the county's zoning district, and given the evidence you've heard this evening of the inability to perhaps develop it for the reasons that the corridor is there, which has really hindered this particular property owner from making any use of it to benefit from it or to benefit the public and our community, despite the efforts to comply with that. Certainly he didn't come in here asking for this change immediately upon acquiring the property. He sought to comply and to seek an end user that would fall within the parameters that everyone has discussed tonight, and that's just not been possible. And so he will be effectively, prohibited from, use of his property. And so we would ask that you look at the unique character of it in its location and in its being the very first property along the corridor, which is also bounded by the railroad on one side as it moves on down 64.
Brad, whenever you, or I guess it's Brad, was here, and I couldn't hardly hear you, but,
That was David and
so
Abbott at the last spoke, sir.
Yeah, we're supposed to base the highest and best use of a piece of property on the person that wants it rezoned? I mean, have we had any outside, look at this to say that it's not? I mean, if we had a survey done or something, a plat that said that we can't have industrial on there, or it can't be put on there, that's a whole different story. But if we just have to rely upon the person that's bringing the, application for change, you know, that may be a conflict of interest.
And I'm sorry, Commissioner McClure, but I have to address what you said to me. I don't have a platform. I'm pretty sure nobody inside this room right here tonight knows exactly how I'm gonna vote. It might even be a surprise to you when I do vote, but I don't have a platform. And I do agree that everybody on the planning board has an equal voice. I don't think that the chairman or the vice chairman should be the smartest ones in the room. If that's the case, we don't need a board, we just need them two in there. So I respect the voices of all of them because this board selected those members, and I respect those individuals. And I just wanted to clarify my stance on that. Thank you.
All right, and I will answer that if that's okay. I did not.
Go ahead.
When I said platform, I meant what you brought up about the planning board. You have mistaken what I said. I did not mean anything toward you nor toward the people that were on the board.
Well, I apologize.
I was just making a point, as you made a point. But I was not degrading you, didn't mean to insult you or anything else. When I said platform, I was talking about what you said, and that was all.
Took it wrong. Thank you.
I have one question myself. This is adjoining to the Lexington. And I'm sure you answered this earlier, someone did. What is the, what has Lexington put on this type of?
Can you repeat your question one more time?
Mr. Trull, we're not hearing you. I don't know what's going on. Can you try that again?
Can you hear it now?
Okay, try it again. Start from the beginning.
Okay, this piece of property is adjoining the city limits of Lexington. Lexington has a area around it that they, put zoning on the property, and what property? What zone is Lexington put on this property? Did I hear someone say earlier, industrial?
Mr. Trull, we're still having trouble hearing you.
I should have paid more for these earplugs up here.
Stay close right there and let's try it again.
Okay. Lexington has put a, zoning on this property. I was just wondering what property, what zoning has Lexington put on this piece of property? Is it industrial?
All right, the property that the city not the city owns, but the city jurisdiction, it's zoned industrial. Both 21 and 29 is zoned industrial.
But doesn't the city, have, an area around the limit that they, recommend the,
I believe you're referring to, this is Brad approaching, I believe you're referring to, I believe I'm interpreting your question to be, what's commonly called an extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ, where a city, has some control out into the county over suggestion of zoning. I believe at the planning meeting, Mr. Corman spoke to that, and Guy, correct me at any place I go awry or astray. The city has no input for us in this matter. They have been contacted and they have no input. And we don't typically have an ETJ into Davidson County from Lexington because the planning staffs cooperate, with each other.
Yes. Lexington is, yeah, Lexington has never, put forth a, extraterritorial jurisdiction.
Well, New Thomasville and Denton, I didn't know about that.
Yes, sir.
Well, I feel like, now I'm not Lexington city government, but looking at the areas within the city, if they did have that extra jurisdictional powers over this area, I think they would approve it. But you look all through the city of Lexington and you see residential right up next to industrial, commercial, and so forth. But the fact that he's had this marketed for basically 5 years, with no takers whatsoever, the landscape of the area, I don't know that he would ever be able to get somebody else to take that parcel. But also, what would be the issue with having residential there? There is residential close by. It may not be next door, but there is residential close by. That's just my taking on it. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with the program. I'm fine with approving it.
This is Brad. Mr. Reed came up to me and asked me to approach the microphone one last time. He has been approached by Tara Green and Tammy Absher and requested that he would voluntarily annex this for the purpose he intends. So the city, to answer your question, would like to have it for this purpose, but he prefers that it stay in the county.
Yeah, lower taxes.
And I apologize for the length of this. I know it's taken way too long for y'all, and y'all got a lot more to do. One other thing I wanted to bring up was, I lost my train of thought.
Free candy for everybody?
Well, I can tell you this while you're trying to get your train of thought. I think it's a great idea for a, voluntary annexation. And, then let the city rezone this, and then they can listen to the issues from the homeowners and, put up with the issues that probably lies ahead for this piece of property. And like I say, Chris, Mr. Reed, I'm all for pro-business, but I know what happens when somebody else wants to buy, lot number 21 and do some sort of industrial development there, and then we've got houses sitting behind them, so.
Yeah, I apologize.
Voluntary annexation don't involve us at all, so they'll be on the city council's doorsteps, with the issues.
Yeah, my point was, that I was bringing up, is we all realize that the county needs more single-family homes. With the influx of Edgar and Chewy and all this stuff, all the people are going to Winston and Salisbury and High Point. They're not coming to our town. And, you know, I've lived here for 49 years and plan to live here forever. You know, I would like to have nicer restaurants. And so when I approached Century Complete, which used to be Wade Journey, about this property, they did all the research that they wanted, saw that there was a need. They estimated we needed 500 homes. I think Brad could attest to this as well. 500 homes immediately in Davidson County to harness the influx of people that want to come here. So, like I said, Century Complete did all their research on it, and they wanted all the lots immediately, as fast as we could get them. So they see there's a need. And like Brad referenced, this is the first parcel going into the county, so it's not like it's in the middle of the corridor. And in fact, I didn't even know there was a corridor until last week when Guy called me and said, hey, this is a corridor. So I didn't even know anything about it, like I said, until last week. But there is a need. I think this would be a perfect spot to get people downtown, into the county, into the city. And I appreciate everything.
Well, if the city was so hot up on this and wanted the thing immediately, why don't they just, as, Todd said, just annex it?
This is Chris again. I don't want it in the city.
I understand.
Guy?
Yes,
How long has that MPO, as a commercial corridor been in effect? I know we're now on the leg from Randolph County to 109.
Yes.
To Kennedy Road, I think it is, first
Yes.
leg.
Well, it's on the, you're speaking of the, Strategic Transportation Improvement Plan.
Right, yeah.
And, it's on hold right now because of the funding, problems that this DOT has, but, it's slated, in the next 20 years.
But they've already begun it on the Randolph side.
Yes. They're coming around Ashboro now with the, bypass. And they're currently doing their due diligence with, environmental studies and, on the section from, Randolph County to 109.
We recently extended our sewer underneath 85 and got our first pump there to
Correct.
address some needs down that way.
Got another question for you right quick, Guy. What is the city of Lexington's, strictest zoning as far as, heavy industrial? I know you said this was, just on industrial? Lot number 21, what is their most,
I would say
heavy
that,
industrial zoning?
I would say their, industrial is equivalent to our heavy industrial.
Is it, okay, HI?
Yes, sir.
So this property, 21A and 21B, is sitting right in the middle of all HI property, other than still HI on the one I guess he's wanting to get rezoned. So it pretty much sits right in the middle of heavy industrial.
Well, you've got, on three sides of it, you got the county's heavy industrial district, and then across the highway, you have some LI limited industrial, and then you've got the, city's industrial on the, west side of the.
But I'm talking about in the middle, where the railroad track is, it sits in the middle of heavy industrial, on each side of it, on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to know what the city's strictest zoning was, so I got my answer.
So, let me ask again, Guy, how far does the 64 corridor, business corridor, go down 64? All the way to, does
It
it
goes
go
down to,
after 85 to
yeah,
109?
all the way to 109, yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's where it ends.
You ready for a motion, Madam Chair?
Do we have any further discussion? Or any other questions?
I'm ready for a motion, or I'm ready to give one.
All right, okay,
Well, I think I was asking for the motion, Mr. Price.
okay.
I make a motion that in lieu of the recommendation of the staff, as well as the fact that it sets abutting two HI districts, I make a motion that we deny the request. I second that motion.
Who was the second?
True.
Mr. Truitt. Okay, let's call for a vote.
Okay.
Explain the vote, Madam Chair.
That was to deny it.
It would be to deny it based on the fact that
Yes is support of the motion, no is.
yes is support of the motion and no is against the motion. Yes, sir. Commissioner Kratz?
No.
Commissioner Elliott?
So yes means no?
Yes means you support it.
Yes
Yes.
means that you don't want it to
Or-
pass, and no means you want this motion to fail so we can go back and approve it.
These are always tough decisions.
Jeopardy music.
No.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Truill,
Yes.
Commissioner Shell,
Yes.
Commissioner Yates,
Yes.
Chair Watford.
No.
4-3.
That motion carries by a vote of 4-3.
All right. Thank you all involved. All right, we're on item E, rezoning request by David B. Coe for Piedmont Triad Land Developers in Lexington Township containing 19.75 acres from RA3 to MXR. I declare the public hearing open. Mr. Corman will introduce the application.
Yes, you have a request by David B. Coe on behalf of Piedmont Triad Land Developers to rezone 19 3/4 acres, more or less, in Lexington Township, tax map 321 being a portion of Lot 5. Said property is located on the south side of Arnold Road, directly across from the Arnold Road and Old Walnut Lane intersection. Rezoning is requested to change from RA3 Rural Agricultural District to that of MXR Mixed Use Residential District. The Planning and Zoning Board discussed this application, and at that time, the board recommended 5-0 to recommend approval of the request as it was presented to the board. For the record, the property owners currently are Joyce Funderburk and Julia Starnes. They have signed the application in support of the request. This is to be called Raven Ridge subdivision. It is for residential purposes. Let's see here, let me get my maps out. If you want to go to the site plan, Madam Clerk. Okay, and there's a total of let's see, 35 lots with this particular subdivision. As you can see, there's a little over 9 acres being preserved as common area. And as you can see, Towhee Trail is giving access to that common area and also to potentially to the adjoining lot that is also owned by Joyce Funderburk for potential future development. Mr. Coe is here to discuss his application, and I would tell you that they have met with the DOT and have a driveway permit location approved. Of course, they will have to engineer and construct the road to meet the minimum DOT standards for future addition to the secondary road system.
Again, I thank you for being here. Mr. Coe's tired. That last one, I want to let each one of you commissioners know that I respect your opinions. I think we did a very thorough job of pursuing that. As my grandmother would said, we dug a hole, stood there and barked at it for a while. This one's pretty simple. Towhee Trail is lined up right across from the road into the adjacent subdivision across the road. DOT's looked at it. Sunset Ridge. DOT's looked at it and they're fine with it. The roads will be NCDOT standard, be state maintained upon completion. Only a portion of the property owned are we asking to rezone to MXR because we believe only a portion of it is suitable for that zoning. We do have access and adjacent proximity to Lexington Sewer. They've agreed to accept the sewer. Davidson Water is available. I have terminated or do plan to terminate Towhee Trail with a permanent T-turnaround. You can see it on the site plan there. That will provide future access for residential development, possibly of the remainder of the Funderburk tracks or other tracks to the south. But because of the gas lines crossing, I don't feel it's reasonable at this juncture to pursue extending services into that area. So any further residential development would be larger lot septic type subdivision, we believe, at this point. Happy to answer any questions. Fairly small, 35 lots, not a large subdivision compared to many we've looked at.
Is that near the church, Brad?
I just give directions from the gun shop. Everybody knows where the gun store is. You go out Arnold Road from the gun store. It's the last parcel on the left before you cross the interstate.
That's what I thought.
There is no exit there.
Actually looked at that parcel by myself.
Currently fully wooded.
Board members, the North Davison area, or this area just north of Lexington, I should say, between Lexington and Welcome is becoming very popular for residential development. We've seen a number of new subdivisions in this area. It is being provided public sewer by the city of Lexington, and water would be provided by Davidson Water.
Housing, the same as the first one we looked at when I came in here tonight. The Sunnyvale, Wilkes Creek type housing, 185 to 240, give or take, depending on which house plan's picked. These are very popular. The first week of quarantine, I don't believe there were any sales, but actually the second week of quarantine, 2 went under contract in Sunnyvale. So that product is still moving even in these challenging times.
Still showing out.
I apologize, my smiling, but I kept hearing Toke Weed Trail, and I'm like, Toke and Weed, Towhee Trail, and I was like, what kind of name?
It's a bird. It's a rufous-sided smokeweed trail. That's right.
We now know where Commissioner Elliott's mind is at.
I was thinking, what kind of name is that? So, wow.
Yeah.
I thought you smelled a little skunky when you got.
Oh, no, I don't
Need to get the sheriff back in here. Yeah. No, it's Towhee, and that is a bird.
Hey, Guy, what school zone is this in?
North Davison.
This again would be North Davidson.
North Davison?
Yeah.
Welcome,
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Okay.
Any questions? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak either in favor of or opposition to this request?
There's no one else present, Madam Chairman.
Okay. You want to provide any additional information? Do we have any additional questions that have come to your mind?
Make a motion.
Mr. Foreman? I'm sorry.
Planning board here was what? Yeah, I see it, 5-0. Okay.
5-0.
5-0, yes, sir.
Mr. Kornman?
All right, Arnold
Further discussion?
Yes, Arnold Road is a state-maintained secondary road with a carrying capacity to accept additional vehicle traffic expected to be generated by the residents living in this new subdivision. Arnold Road is characterized as being a collector road, while the subdivision is strategically located to give residents easy access to jobs and urban services in both the Winston-Salem and Lexington areas. Policy 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, 6.6, 6.7, and 6.10 can be cited to provide, of the land development plan, to provide support for the proposed rezoning as it's presented, and for these reasons, we feel like the proposal is reasonable and consistent with the, overall comprehensive plan for the area.
You ready for
I believe I'll declare the public hearing closed. Motion and second to approve or deny.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion to approve if, Mr. Coe would put the, deed restrictions on landlord policies written out.
Consistent with what we spoke about in the
Yes.
first one. Yes, sir, I do.
And I would
And
make
to
a
adopt
motion
the
to adopt
resolution.
a statement of consistency.
Second the motion.
Thank you. I have a second as well. All right, let's vote.
Commissioner Crotts?
Aye.
Commissioner Elliott?
Aye.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Truill?
Yes.
Commissioner Shell?
Yes.
Commissioner Yates?
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Watford?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't say this lightly, I do appreciate the, commissioners of Davidson County for continuing to have public hearings as needed for, my clients to do their business, to request rezonings and move forward with their projects. Some counties are not so, resident and business friendly, and I've always appreciated this board and the work they do in that respect, and I thank you for hearing all the cases tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brad. All right, we have one more rezoning request by Clayton Holmes, care of Scott Smith in Emmons Township, containing 15.73 acres from RS to RA2, and Mr. Fry will lead this off.
I don't think so.
I'll be glad.
Sorry, I thought that since you led it off the last one, that you would lead it off this one.
Yeah, I'll be glad to speak to that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Foreman.
The, planning board was scheduled to discuss this item at its April the 7th meeting, but there were concerns raised by some of the adjoining property owners who felt like, they did not want to, risk coming to the, meeting site, and so they asked, that the item be tabled. So the board, voted, 5-0 to continue this item until its June the 2nd meeting. And therefore, it would be my recommendation that you would continue this to your June 23rd meeting, I believe it is.
Yes, sir.
Motion
Yes,
to
that's
continue,
it.
Madam
Second.
Chair.
So motion and second, let's vote.
Okay. Commissioner Crotts?
Aye.
Commissioner Elliott?
Aye.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Truill?
Aye.
Commissioner Shell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shell?
Aye.
Commissioner Yates?
Aye.
Chair Watford?
Yes,
Thank you.
The next one.
thank you. All right, let's move to items for deliberation. The first is a conversation regarding the letter from Gaston County. Commissioner Crotts will lead this off.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I know, many of us have already been contacted, by many business leaders and citizens in our county. It's not just the business part of having our state shut down, but also the mental part of being held up in your house. And I feel like if we go much longer, it's gonna be even more devastating to our state and national economy. Gaston County Commissioners has sent a letter to the governor, and, staff and myself have changed some wording to it to make it adapt to Davidson County, but I would like to read it in hopes that we would approve it, and, Madam Chairwoman could sign this letter and send it to our governor as well. Dear Governor Cooper, first of all, on behalf of the Davidson County Board of Commissioners and the citizens of Davidson County, we are praying for you and your team as you navigate through this challenge and make difficult decisions that impact every person in North Carolina. I write you today with a request on how to move forward once the stay-at-home order has expired at the end of April. I know you must be keenly aware of the ramifications the restrictions are having on our economy and the morale of our citizens. Like you, not a day goes by that our board members don't hear from a business owner that is worried how they will keep the lights on. The shutdown and uncertainty is causing a disruption that could take years to recover. Because of that, we would like to formally request that you once again allow counties to make decisions on how to proceed. We firmly believe that Davidson County, along with each of the other 99 counties, can best decide on how to address the risk in each of our home territories. We would continue to work with our local health department and hospital systems to closely monitor capacity. We still plan to limit gatherings, promote proper sanitation efforts, mandate safe social distancing guidelines, and possibly implement some type of requirement to wear face masks when in public to keep our citizens safe. We can do this while also allowing our people to fully get back to work. In short, our board believes counties can monitor and deal with this situation at a local level more effectively and efficiently than the state can. Again, thank you for all that you're doing. I look forward to your response. Sincerely, Karen Watford, Chairman, Davidson County Board of Commissioners.
It's my opinion that anytime you can have local control rather than the state telling you what to do, it's a good thing.
I agree with that.
Amen.
I agree with Commissioner McClure, 100%.
Well, I mean, now as of this afternoon, you can't even buy paint. You can't buy seeds and work in your garden because of the recent executive order. So now you've got people that will be sitting at home with that's going to go stir crazy.
Ms. Chairwoman?
Mr. Crotts,
Yes, ma'am.
in this last executive order, did he require the paint and that sort of thing? I was not able to find that. I thought that was in other states, but not necessarily here.
There was parts of it that I read, and I'd have to go back and look through it more detailed, but even having the way it's set up now, like going to Walmart, is hard to navigate. And going to Food Line, the way they have it set up right now because of this latest order being very difficult to navigate. But you're having people stuck at home when they can wear a mask and still go to work.
And I'm just talking, I'm just making comments and asking questions for all of you. Face masks are not readily available, should we get that specific if we do send this letter of support? Should we specify face masks specifically?
Well, in the letter, it says possibly implement some type of requirement to wear a face mask. I read that and I think, is that a bandana over your face? Is it a T-shirt that you've tied around your face? Some sort of face covering? Because what I have read online, as long as it's basically 2-ply cloth, like a bandana folded in half, that your effective rate goes up, your efficiency. So that's the way I read it. Now, we can change and alter this letter however this board wants to change that, but it does say possibly. To me, I look at it as a compromise. Like, hey, we can all go back to work, but we can wear some sort of covering.
I'm saying strike the face mask. I don't want nobody telling me I gotta wear one. That'll be my decision.
I like that too.
Why don't we just make the letter in general to let the counties make the decision,
That's right.
not to.
Mhm. Yes, sending that message, I still believe it's definitely gonna be up to the governor. The governor's gonna make the final decision, but the whole idea behind it, as Mr. Crot's suggesting, is just to tell him, we're ready for you to consider this. Am I reading that the way you all are?
And I think he'll end up giving local control to counties and municipalities. Wake County's not, affected the same as Davidson County, so he's gonna have to give some sort of local control to different counties, I would think, so.
Mm-hmm.
I agree to get things rolling.
Are we saying to give control to every county or just the counties he picks out? Is that what you said, Todd?
Yeah, I'm saying the governor would, it would appear to me that he would have to sometime, give the local control back over to the local municipalities and the counties, because every county is suffering different, so it's hard to throw a blanket over all of us at one time, so I think to restart it, I think he's gonna have to do that.
You know,
Would be my opinion.
prior to his executive order in the shelter at home, issue, him and Dr. Cohen, they were trying to relate to give it to the local authorities to make those, decisions, and then when they made the grab, they made a huge grab. I think the only way that we can get back to business is, you can't hold us accountable, like Commissioner Yates said, with a Mecklenburg County. So obviously, we could get back to work faster than somebody like that, but I still think this is probably a far distant, thing, but we gotta start somewhere, and I don't like the state telling us exactly what to do here in Davidson County.
No, I mean, this ain't exactly worded
Yeah,
how I would personally like to word it.
On this paragraph where the face mask is, let me make a recommendation, and y'all shoot it down, okay? Because it may be good and it may not be. I believe I would have that paragraph, we would continue to work to keep our citizens safe. We can do this while also allowing our people to fully get back to work. That takes in everything. I don't think we need to list what we're planning on doing, because we don't know what we're planning on doing till the crisis hits us.
I don't either.
I agree.
I think it's a good idea, Steve.
I agree.
Okay,
Because I think you're getting too far into the weeds, and we're not there. You've got a lot of things to consider.
What is your thoughts, Commissioner Cross? You okay
I'm good with it.
I like that, Commissioner Shell.
I'm loving
You know,
the
I
fact that
like-
this entire board is all in agreement.
You know, I like the letter also. One thing I keep thinking about, what if David County? He says, okay, open it up the way you want to. And then Forsyth County and Guilford County says no. Does that bring their people over here to do their shopping or do their?
It does, and therein lies another problem that might occur.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So it seems to me that, it's a good effort to say, we're ready for you to consider it. But he's definitely gonna have to, for example, if North Carolina opened up and all the rest of the counties around, states around us did not, what would happen? Everybody be coming in here, perhaps endangering our lives as well as theirs. So,
And that's where the problem stands, because that's why New York or California's got more than we've got, is because they got more people.
right.
And we could have all those people also. That's what I keep looking at.
Yeah, that's a concern.
Well, and this is getting into the weeds too much, if whatever it was that we decided to do, we wouldn't decide, to do something that was gonna be detrimental to our folks.
No.
In other words, we're not gonna make decisions, even if Forsyth County or Guilford County wants to come in, what we're gonna do is gonna protect the citizens of our county.
Agree.
So if they come in, then they're gonna have to follow the same rules that everybody else follows here in the county.
Mr. Trull, did you have a conversation with Lillian? Is Lillian able to speak to us about this?
I've talked with Lillian about it, and, you know, Lillian and our health department is part of the state, and as such, they're part of the state health organization naturally. So, whatever we do couldn't really change our health department that much. They're doing a great job the way they are, and I don't see how they can, well, I'm sure that we can tell the health department to relax some of their restrictions. But I don't know exactly all the restrictions she has either. We don't have control of our health department. We only hire them and pay them. That's about it.
The way it's set up, you can do stuff more strict than the state, but not less.
Exactly, exactly.
Madam Chair, Lillian is at the microphone if the board would like to hear from her.
Okay. I certainly would. Lillian, would you make some commentary or share some of what you're thinking?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. It's nice to hear your voice. I have seen the letter that was written by Gaston County, and I have had the opportunity to speak with the Gaston County, Public Health Director and, the DHHS Director there. They're a consolidated agency. And we talked a little bit about the decision that, prompted this letter, and I would be more than willing to provide this board with any information if it does come down to the local level that would help y'all make decisions like that. Right now, I think some of the concerns that have been brought up are valid, but to be honest with you, if we were a county who was on the border of the state of North Carolina, we might be having those same questions. If Virginia doesn't do it, if South Carolina doesn't do it, how does that look? So I think there's a lot of things to be taken into account with this, and as your public health department, we will provide you with all the information that we possibly can to help y'all if that decision does come back to the local level.
As far as local level, what decision is not before the local level?
Right now, I think the way I'm understanding it, the governor's made the executive order and it affects us here locally, but we didn't have the opportunity to make that executive order, but we have to abide by it because the governor made it.
Yeah, but what part are you not abiding by, and if you give us information not pertinent to an individual's privacy?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Are you a covered entity?
A HIPAA-covered entity?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And do you understand that per the information that you sent out, that a covered entity is defined to include most healthcare providers, as well as health insurers and certain others? Local health departments are covered under HIPAA if they provide clinical health care services. Now, do you provide clinical health care services?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I agree. In North Carolina, most health departments are county departments. Are you a county department?
Yes, sir.
So, being a county department, so the county is actually the covered entity, not the health department. You are a subsidiary of the county. So any information you have belongs to the county.
No, sir. No, sir, that, I would disagree with that, characterization. There are certain departments within the county that are a HIPAA-covered entity, but that does not extend to every department within the county.
We're not.
I'm reading what the information you sent out is. You're directing it to the wrong person. I just read this from this information that she sent to us.
But I would respectfully disagree that, for example, Mr. Corman's sitting here. The, planning and zoning is not a covered entity.
We're talking about the health department. Let's don't get off course and start getting people mixed up on things.
Well, when you said a moment ago that the county is a covered entity, I don't believe that the county in totality, that not every department within the county is a covered entity, no.
I'm reading what was sent out by your health director.
Okay,
and so you need to take that up with her. So that's where we're getting confused, Chuck, because we're receiving no information, and then the information received is being conflicted. And then we got citizens out here
asking us questions, and we're caught with our pants down because we don't know any more than the next citizen over.
Are we still talking about the letter that Mr. Kratz has
No,
brought?
sir. We're no, sir, we're
Oh,
not.
you
I
wanna
think
switch
we're
the
getting
subject and
off
go
on
back to
another
that?
topic.
Okay, go ahead and do that then. That's typical. Okay.
No,
Lillian, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Shell, I
Yes.
just think that if we need to have a conversation about that, you know, or we need to have a conversation with Lillian, maybe that's at another time, but tonight we're trying to have a conversation about whether we want to send a letter and what would be in that letter to merely, I think at this point in time, suggest to the governor, we as an individual county feel like our people are concerned about the economy, and we'd like for you to consider making some plans to putting our people back to work and allowing some changes within your executive orders. Maybe it needs to be something just as simple as that. Because I don't think we're at a place to be extremely specific, and that's where we need to, that's what this conversation is
Madam
about.
Chair, the conversation goes back to the letter as to what we can actually do and convince the governor that we can do on behalf of our citizens. Now, in order to do that, we can't be operating in the blind. That's pertinent to this letter here of what we're telling the governor that we can and cannot do. And so we have to know what we're doing before we can do anything. And so though it may sound so, Lily, this is not an attack on you. I commend you and your department for the job that you're doing. It's a tough job. But it seems like people have forgot that the commissioners have a tough job too. And we have to answer to the public out here. And for, the example is the information when I talked to our county manager, and we were dealing with facts, not speculations, on 71 people that no commissioner had received the information on those 71 people. We have a right to that because you're not talking about an individual. If we have that information, then we can direct that information action via the letter that we're planning to send to Governor Cooper. That's my point.
To answer your question about what information exactly that I could provide at the health department would be real-time data for known positive COVID-19 patients. Unfortunately, at this time, the criteria for testing has drastically changed, and so where we saw an early jump and a spike, we're starting to level off a little bit because not so many people are eligible for testing. But I could provide that to the commissioners. That is not any sort of protected information, a real number. I can also work with our hospitals to talk with them about how many individuals are in the hospitals receiving care who are positive COVID-19 patients. That may help y'all too. We could also look at the dates that people are becoming positive and track those as on Monday there were 3 new cases, on Tuesday there were 2 new cases, or whatever that case may be. And that may be information that would help Davidson County understand where we were in the COVID-19 crisis.
So I would like to speak to this, Madam Chairman, if I could.
Yes, sir, Mr. Elliott.
And also, so this was gonna be in the item that I selected to talk about, but since we're already talking about this, I have a lot of really good templates. It's just, information that we can share, and kinda like the Excel format that would be good to see as a commissioner. It should be fairly easy, and it's protected information. It's not like, because it becomes public knowledge, it's nothing that somebody could see that would put somebody at risk. And also, I have the pretty good information because Dr. Azar, because it is COVID-19, gave us a waiver on HIPAA information. A lot of people don't know about that, and it's kind of been fresh off the mark, but it's because we're fighting an invisible enemy. And basically, this was done for boards of commissions, for councilmen, for directors, for state EOCs, for the EOC that we have here locally in Rockingham County. We call it the COVID Task Force, and we all get together and we all have to fight. So there's information that Casey needs to be privy to, information that our assistant county manager needs to be privy to. But absolutely, we need to be privy to it, because there's been multiple cases to where I find out information either on the dispatch or on Facebook, and I have citizens asking me, and I have no clue to what's going on. Some of that's because I could possibly reach out and get that information, but I'd just like an email or something, you know. And Casey's been doing great, you know, with the last week and a half, something like that. But I'd sent an email asking to be kind of informed, because so many people are calling. I'm like, I don't know. And I was actually told, well, what are you good for? What are you good for? How do you think that makes me feel? You know, the people that elected me to sit in here at this office, and I have no clue what's going on, what demographic, what they should be watching out for. The last one was the Walmart episode. Luckily, we got all that, you know, kind of ironed out. But I have a template. We can share it. I think you're doing a phenomenal job. I think you and your staff are doing great. And like I said, this is not an attack on you. It's not an attack on the staff. It's just a moment of clarity that in the midst of all this trouble, I think at the end of this, when we get over it, we all need to meet and go over, you know, a SWOT analysis. What are our strengths, our weaknesses? What do we do really good? What are some things that we need to work on? This is just a moment in time to say, hey, listen, maybe we could work on all of us communicating a little bit better together. I think you're doing a fantastic job, and that's all I have to say. I appreciate the staff.
Could I ask a question? What kind of questions are people asking you? Because they're not calling me and asking me specific details. There's some things that I don't think I need to know, or I don't think the general public needs to know. You know, we had a conversation about, you know, hotspots and finding out where it was in this area or on this road. When you get, I've heard people say that they go into places and they're afraid if they sneeze that they're going to be attacked by people. This is causing all kinds of hysteria, and I think we have to be careful about what is shared. But I'm not understanding what it is some of you are wanting. What kind of information you're wanting.
I hope everybody out there in Facebook land and on YouTube that's watching this can contact Chairman Wadford and ask her the same questions that you've been asking me. I just ask that y'all do that so that she can answer these questions, because I've been getting a lot of questions. And
what kind
quite
of questions
frankly,
do you get?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay, how many cases do we have? How many, you know, not only the recoveries, but where have they been? Do they work outside the county? Do they live inside the county? Did they contract it in Guilford? Did they get it here? And all that information we can get. Now, since we've opened up Pandora's box, let me just tell you, I'm a little bit different because I work for county government full time. I'm the safety and risk manager of another county, and I see the information that is shared with that Board of Commissioners daily. And I'm not attacking the staff or anything like that. I'm just saying it is good to be notified of that information, for when things come up, you're in the loop. It's a different story being outside and not being notified. And I know the chairman gets a little bit of more information because she's the head of kind of what's going on, but I feel like all of us should be notified. That's all I'm saying.
It's a lot different than driving the bus and riding on the back seat.
Madam Chair.
The thing about it is when let me give you an example. A conversation we had back at that time, okay, I'm talking about at that time, and it holds pretty much true, but we had 71 cases. Now, you got people afraid to leave their house, leave their yard, because you get COVID-19, you're going to die. That's what they're being told by the media. You're going to die if you get COVID-19. They're in panic. They're in fear. And of the 71 cases, we had one die at that time, in the mid-80s, with underlying conditions, had 2 hospitalized, 2, had near 30 in recovery, and the rest nobody even heard about because they hadn't been to the hospital or doctor. That is good news, and our citizens deserve to hear that. Nobody knew that.
Nobody knew
Madam
that.
Chair.
All we knew, we had 71 cases. That's all we knew. And that's not right. When we have to answer to the citizens, whoever's responsibility it is to get it to us. I'm not saying it's yours, Lily. You may need to pass it over to somebody else. But we need to have good information, so when our citizens ask us something, we don't get that deer in the headlight look like, I don't know.
Well,
You know, nobody likes to feel like that. And it should not be that the people who are elected by the people of this county, to run this county, sit back and let everybody else do all the work. It shouldn't be that. Now, some people are happy doing that and are happy to let the staff do everything. I'm not one of those people.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner McClure.
I would like to make a motion that we approve this letter with the 2 changes that Mr. Shell had made. We're talking about everything in the world but this motion. And we get back on here and get the motion out of the way. If we want to bring up this other stuff, at a different time, that's fine.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the table to send this letter to the governor, with those changes as suggested by Mr. Shell. Any further discussion before we vote?
Yeah, what was the changes that Mr. Shell made?
Will you repeat those, Mr. Shell?
Simply, instead of, making it such that we have to perform to certain acts, because we may forget certain acts, it is we would continue to work to help keep our citizens safe. We can do this while also allowing our people to fully get back to work. And that encompasses, I think, everything, Commissioner Truill. You know, we don't know what we need to do until the time comes. We don't know where our health director is going to direct us that we need to do. We need to take some more action, you know, so we just don't know at this point.
And just prior to that, urging the governor, when he takes this state of emergency off on April 30th, that he allow the counties to work with our people to get them back to work, rather than the state trying to do it for every county.
I like that. I like that, Commissioner McClure.
So is that
Any
subject of the
other-
motion?
Commissioner McClure, can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, that whenever the governor, and that's who we're sending a letter to, right?
Yes.
Whenever the governor makes a decision on April the 30th, to put the people back to work, or to release this stay, that he allows the counties to make the decisions on when and how that is carried out. And that's what, in essence, what Steve said is, you know, put it on the burden of the counties, let the counties decide. Wake County is not the same as Davidson County.
I agree.
And he's gonna make a decision on April the 30th of some way. And all we need to do is to ask him to let us make a decision locally.
Okay, so would the last sentence of the paragraph that Commissioner Shell is talking about, would it be acceptable that the last sentence is, we can do this while also allowing people to get fully back to work, and when the decision is made to put the people back to work, that he allow the counties to put a plan in place for implementation?
There you go.
Okay.
You said it prettier.
Debbie, did you also take out the face mask
Yes, ma'am.
portion?
Let me read that paragraph that Commissioner
Please
Shell started
do.
with. We would continue to work to help keep our citizens safe. We can do this while also allowing our people to fully get back to work. And when the decision is made to put the people back to work, that he allow the counties to put a plan in place for implementation. Or would you rather have that the governor, or that you allow the counties to put a plan in place for implementation, since it is to him?
I like that.
Yeah, that's the governor.
Okay.
And I don't know that we wanna lock ourselves into having to design a plan. We'd be much better off to just say that let the counties make the decisions of when and how the people go back to work.
Yeah, I like that.
But this all may be.
There would be a plan.
And and say that you can do whatever you want. In that case, we don't have to do any of it. But the thought is that he's going to go beyond April the 30th with this stay and shelter. And we wanted to tell him that after April 30th, the counties want to have a say. Ever have you want to flower that up, but that's basically what we want to do. Is whenever that thing comes around, we don't want them making decisions for 100 counties based on what he sees in Durham and Wake.
Lillian, you may want to sit down. We'll probably need you back up in a little while when we discuss this other stuff. So I think you're still standing there and watching you on TV.
She's down.
Is she down?
Yeah.
My TV must be froze then.
How do the rest of you, how are you, does application still concern you about individual counties doing individual things, and the danger behind that? Yeah, you know, that's going further down the road, I know, but.
I want the Davidson County to be able to make a decision on whether or not we're gonna have face masks on everybody. We need to make a decision on how we're gonna deal with the retail establishment, instead of having the governor just make a blanket statement that everybody's gonna do this.
I agree.
It's, local control has a hand on the pulse of the county, and they know where the risks are in the county, and they know how to deal with them. And we want to be able to do that, and that's all I was saying after, in that letter. And that's what the intent of the letter was with the Gaston County Commissioners.
Yes. I agree with Commissioner McClure. The only time that I have seen, when this first started was when Lexington City made a curfew, and that was creating confusion out in the county, thinking that it affected them, and I would have to explain, unless you live in the city limits, it doesn't. That's the only time I've seen anything that was confusing, but, I like the concept of the letter. I wish we could even go a little bit more into it, but then he wouldn't, agree to it, 'cause I'd probably say what he's done is unconstitutional. But then he would just rip it up, throw it away. So I like it as it is, and I believe, there's a motion in a second.
We have a motion and a second.
I thought we had that already. I thought we was voting.
We
Yep,
are.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I really thought I thought we was in discussion.
Are we?
Yeah. I mean, the idea was to have a discussion, a conversation regarding the letter. That's what we're in, a conversation regarding the letter. We have a motion and we have a second, if you're ready to vote upon it. If you feel like you need some more time, just let me know.
I'm
We'll
ready.
move along.
I'm ready, Madam Chair.
Ready?
Let's vote.
Chairman.
Okay, Commissioner Krotz,
We,
Commissioner Elliott,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Truill,
Yes.
Commissioner Shell,
Yes.
Commissioner Yates,
Yes.
Chair Watford.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Secondly, we had some discussion on Mr. Elliott's COVID discussion. Do we need to continue with that?
Yeah, I think so. I got a couple of questions there, and now it's probably the proper time.
Okay.
I kindly agree with, or don't kindly, I agree with Commissioner, Elliott and some Commissioner Shale and some others there. I was talking to a doctor today. I'm doing a job for him, and, we need to know how many people's in the hospital daily, or how many's been released. Some of the questions I've had, everybody's been watching the news, and they're thinking we're out of ventilators and we're out of hospital rooms. And we don't have any of that information, so I had to ask, Casey yesterday for that information. And, we've had 10 people in the hospital as of, during this whole crisis, this pandemic, almost a month now. So, you know, with discussing this with the doctor, and I agree with him, and the state needs to be asking for this information. So we need to know how many's hospitalized, how old they are, how long they stay, if they go into ICU, how long they stay in ICU, whether a ventilator is used. I mean, you know, this ain't no joke we're playing with here, so we need statistics that we can use and, you know, race, see if it's affected one race worse than the other, gender. So, you know, I don't know how hard that is for Lillian to get that information. I wouldn't think very hard. I think our government would want it because they need to know how to fight this battle they got. And, so, you know, and it could be something, I think Commissioner Shell said this a while ago, going across into Fort South, let's just say one of the, joining county lines. Maybe if it was a bad enough pandemic, as a state of emergency, we would have to close off the borders of the county line. So that's why you need that information if they think it was contracted. I know a lot of people don't even know where they contracted at, so that's just my thought. But I would like to see that basic spreadsheet. You could put about a dozen things on there, and that'd be a lot of information that we would have. I think we have one in Davidson County Hospital now, one patient, is what we had yesterday, so.
Commissioner Yates, this is Casey, real quick, I just want to chime in. The state does have this on their NC COVID-19 dashboard. They've got hospitalizations, number of tests, they've got gender and ethnicity.
I don't care about the state of North Carolina.
No, it shows it by county as well. Well, it shows the deaths and the confirmed cases, so, I mean, the stuff.
Does it show how many we have in the does it show how many we have in the hospital at any given time?
For the ones that are participating, all hospitals aren't participating.
Yeah, all hospitals are not participating. It's got a lot of information on there, but
that's what I'm saying. I don't know if Lillian talks to these people that's contracted coronavirus, but and I don't know if we've reached out to the High Point Hospital. I'm sure we've got some of our citizens in the High Point Hospital. Some of them I know is in Winston in the hospital. You know, maybe some of them in the Rowan County Hospital. But again, we may have 30 patients in the hospital. But, you know, really what I'm concerned about, like I say, people's watching the news and they calling me going, you know, the hospitals are busting at the seams. And then I talk to friends of mine that are in the healthcare and they say, we're going home because there's nobody in the hospitals, you know? So, but I don't have an answer for our citizens that ask. I had one ask me last night, how many people do we have in the hospital in Davidson County right now? Luckily, I'd asked that question yesterday morning, and I knew the answer. But if I hadn't asked that question, I wouldn't have knew. And those, to me, are basic questions, and so did this doctor that I discussed it with today. He thought that was pretty basic information. We really, as a board of commissioners, should have at least should be in our sites.
Well, that state site is a very informative site. And it gives you about as much detail as you want. Whenever people call me and ask me, I tell them to go to that site and look up Davidson County, and they'll give them up-to-date numbers on Davidson County.
It's something from the health department to update daily, I think it is. And it maybe don't give you all of that information, but it gives you quite a bit of information.
And you know, it's questions on not necessarily numbers, but more procedural. And, you know, for Lillian's defense and for everybody that was, you know, talking about the Walmart deal, out of nowhere, the State Human Resources Office on April 13th, Dominic sends out, he sends out a memorandum, revised guidelines for agency response to COVID-19 infections of employees, and FEMA Public Assistant Grant Program information for agency worksite cleaning, reimbursement, and template notification letters for the employees about deep cleaning our facilities, what we're going to do when we have something. Do you just send home, you know, second, I guess if you're second in line, so second contacted people, or maybe third or fourth, depending on what the FEMA, or not the federal regulations say, because you can get that emergency medical leave, but necessarily you might not be sent home for a 14-day quarantine because you might not be the second person in the line. So things like this that people are asking me, I got from some of the letters and notifications here, but then, you know, kind of figuring out, well, so-and-so's got this, I was around them, does that mean that I'm affected? Or how should we clean our facility? How's the county cleaning their facilities? What kind of process do y'all have in place? And all this kind of things. I know personally what we're doing in Rockingham County, but if somebody asks me here, which they have, I don't really know what our plan is. What is our plan if somebody gets infected here? Do we clean that at night? What are we gonna do? Do we send whole apartments home? What's our plan for, you know, getting people back? And I told them I don't know. And that's not the answer that I kind of want to give them. At least I'll find out, you know. I've been saying that too, but after you say I find out, you know, a couple of times, it gets old to them. So that's some of the deals when notifying employees that, you know, they're being sent home, or how do we ensure that businesses are doing that. And I said, you know, that's under the public health director, but you've got so much going on right now. And, you know, it's hard for you to police sites too, and you can issue self-quarantine orders, but it's necessarily something we don't want to do unless we have to do it. And trying to convey that information, for me, it's easy because I might know that, but, you know, commissioners that don't necessarily work in government every day, they need to be notified and understand how to answer the questions also.
Well, and not only that, but let me give you a good recent example. And I've talked to some people, and nobody knew about this. We just had a press release on one of our EMTs. You familiar with that? That nobody told us there was 2 prior to that was in 14-day quarantine and was subject to leave in 2 days and going to go back to work. And why wasn't a press release done on that? Why wasn't we notified of those 2? I mean, that's our people.
Those I sent out to you all.
Afterwards, after the press release on that one.
Well, the press release wasn't about those, I don't think, because
no, they wasn't.
They weren't confirmed, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Nobody knew about it.
Right.
So people can dismiss this information if you want to, but get out here and walk with the public out here and let them hold you accountable and try to answer their questions. They know more than we know. It's on Facebook before we were at that time. It was on Facebook before we didn't even find out about it.
Sure was. Well, and sometimes that happens because some of these people get tested at private doctors, you know, and then they decide to go out and say it themselves out on there, and that's hard to control.
Then is it possible, Casey, that we just made a mistake and didn't do something right? Because it seems like every time a question is asked, it's an excuse given. And at some point, we've got to say, hey, we can do a better job of this. And I'm talking about all of us. I'm not just talking about you. I'm talking about all of us. We can do a better job of handling this. But, you know, if we don't have any information, it's like you commissioners don't matter. We'll take care of everything.
What I have
That's
listed
not
here
right.
for information, so I can get my head around what you guys are asking for. I've got race, gender, hospitalizations, and Mr. Yates threw these out. Rowan, we'll check with Winston-Salem and Lillian. Shake your head no if there's any you can't find or anything. Rowan, Winston-Salem, High Point, we're already doing Lexington and Thomasville. We already do the confirmed cases, I know about that, the fatalities, age, I don't know about that one, we'll have to check. Number of tests, number of recovery. So I've got those as bullet point listed here. We'll get you guys a quarantine plan if it happens inside, which we've already talked about, and there's protocols for that. And then a deep cleaning plan, which we have discussed.
And I'd like to know kind of legislation needs. Do we need to barter for PPE? I mean, I know the state EOC, I know you've got web, whatever it's called, that the emergency services can dial into and they can order, but they're out.
Right.
You know, we've been told they're out. All the counties know that they're out. So, you know, bartering with local businesses. Hey, can you remanufacture this? Can you get that? Those are some of the things that are being done elsewhere that I feel like would be dead in line with what we can do to kind of just be a part of the team. We don't want to run it. We don't need to be in the you know, in the middle and getting in y'all's way, but we want to just know.
Right
so
now,
that we
I think
can,
we're okay on
disperse.
PPEs, and it's because, you know, as I spoke with Larry a few days ago, and I think I alluded that to you all, we haven't run, and I'm talking in plain, I don't have any numbers, I'm just speaking anecdotally here. we've run a lot of cases related to this, where people call in and think they've got it, et cetera.
That's right.
But then we've run less hospitalization cases, because nobody wants to go to the hospital for the obvious reasons. So in his words, I'm about even, where I normally am. That was my first stress or thought. The first pressure point in the county would be on Richie and on EMTs, obviously. And
That's
so,
right.
and then we're always on the calls where the hospitals are involved, Bill James, the folks from Lexington. And we heard early on, you know, Commissioner Yates did ask for the exact number. I got with Lillian and got it for the number that had been sent to hospitals. But they early on, I'm talking as of 2 weeks ago, that we're okay. You know, we're not New York City. We're not seeing the tsunami of cases come in. No, ventilator's not a problem right this minute or an issue. So, their voices were okay. I didn't hear any tension. I didn't hear any, what are we gonna do kind of thing. And at that point, we just kinda, okay, we're managing the cases as they come, you know, and the issues if they happen here. And then obviously for the folks that get it, if they get it involved, and we've had a couple of cases as y'all are aware of. So, we handled those accordingly and handled them through the protocols. I don't know about the exact ones you got from FEMA updated today, but we, you know, like for example, the EMTs, we cleaned the ambulances, we quarantined everybody off, told their partners, backtracked their calls to figure out were they riding with somebody, you know, and get it all squared up to where, and then my fear was at that point, had anybody been in contact with anybody that rode on ambulance? The answer for that individual was no. They were a driver, they were nowhere near somebody. So, at that point, we were kind of wiping the brow and going, all right, you know.
I've been on the phone with Lillian more in the last month or so than I think I ever have, and Lillian has been more than gracious to answer questions and help me facilitate things. Even yesterday I had a question about numbers, and she explained it to me, and I could go back on social media and explain it to everybody, so they did have some clarity. The only thing that, and I agree with Commissioner Elliott and Shell as far as, you know, maybe more data and more information, because I think the bigger picture to look at is, yes, we may have X number of cases, active cases, but we have Y number of people that have recovered and went back to work. And where those are at and how that's working. The one thing I do wish we could do, and I know of one instance right now where a employer, a retail store, has had an active case of it in their store, and they came out with a sideways press release instead of just saying, hey, we had this happen, we have since cleaned the store, and everything's fine. I am catching more people contacting me from Saturday, Sunday, Easter Sunday. I know I fielded at least 10 calls, and that's not counting the stuff on Facebook, of why is this not being reported? And I don't understand why as we as a government can't say, you know this is the case, you've owned up to it to us, you need to put out a press release, and if you don't do it within so many hours, we're going to do it for you. Now, I don't know why we can't do that, because it's public safety.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, sir.
There's a problem with that, and from my viewpoint. You take 81 cases, how many is it now, Lillian?
82.
82? You take 82 cases, a lot of those people work for somebody. Are you gonna do the same thing with everybody?
And that's what I'm saying. I don't know if we have to set a policy or what, because some employers, you don't have anybody that comes in and out of that office. You don't have that. If it was your business up here, well, that day you may not have anybody come in.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying, if you're gonna do it, you're going to have something in place.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, you're gonna have to have some kind of, some sort of scale, because it could be a body shop. Well, nobody goes into the body shop. I understand what you're saying. I don't know how to answer that question to the citizens that comes to me and says, why is this not being done?
Same way.
Because to me, it seems like, one, as a business, you would step up and say this and take ownership of it. And if you get in front of a story, you can control the narrative of it.
Well, the CDC has guidelines of what they have to do in retail stores or any other store if they have an infected person. They have, things that they have to do to clean up. What's one of the things that we can do if we have the authority to do it after the 30th. But, you know, it's been a good discussion, but I'll be honest with you, I don't know that I have every press release, but if I missed one, I don't know where it was, because I get press releases all the time from Casey, and I get stuff from the state association, and I get stuff from the governor. As much as I don't like to do it, I listen to his update at 2:00 every day. Good. And I mean, you know, there's access out there, that website that was cited before for the state, where people can get all of the information that they need. And if watching Cooper, they can see what the plans are for the state.
Commissioner Elliott, can I say one thing? 'Cause he can't see me.
Yeah.
Mr. McClure, I will take the rap for the ones that Mr. Shell spoke of, the 2 quarantines that weren't confirmed positives. So that's mine. Because, you know, I didn't get it out fast. I had, you know, because there was so much going on, probably didn't get it out fast enough. But you're right about the state data website, I mean, the dashboard. It does have a lot of information, but having this specific information here, and I'll talk with Lillian, some of this stuff we're putting out already, and I don't know how much of it we can get. We will talk about it. This here, I'm not sure is even legal.
Have you looked at the waiver?
I have, and it addresses more for hospitals, not her. So I'm not sure that this is contradictory to the guidance we got from the School of Government, which I sent out to you all, that says you can't go deeper than a county level on this. Mm-hmm. And if you look on the state's dashboard, they don't go no deeper than a county level. Okay. And you know they're abiding by HIPAA guidelines.
I would check with Secretary Azar on that, because we specifically talked to Secretary Azar, and the HIPAA waiver that was for public health agencies, and the documentation that county commissioners could get and obtain specifically for this board's use.
I would want to get this checked before we started down there, because you know, this got us to the path of, it gets back to what Commissioner Wofford said, the hot spots.
Yeah.
And then kind of, you know, and I've had conversations with folks about the transmission part of this. You know, then knowing whether it came in from cross county lines, that's real tough. Because then you have to.
But Lillian gets a lot of that information. You have to have that. You have to have the county of origin of the person that does that. That is shared with the health director. Absolutely. It's on the state site that comes through.
Well, and let me be real clear here, because I don't want any misunderstandings, you know, walking off in this conversation. I want to give you everything legally I can give you.
That's right.
Let me say it that way.
This is
But defining what that is has been, somewhat of a challenge.
This is my question as a county commissioner. How much is it legal for you to look at that information, and us as elected officials are not privy to that information?
I don't see it.
Well, see, I see it all the time in our COVID task force as a risk manager. Now, as a risk manager, as the county manager, as everybody that's in the task force, that's been given the waivers because we're fighting an invisible war here. That's the only reason why the waivers have been given. So if that can be given, and the secretary can waive those, and the documentation is in y'all's hand for review, you can call Secretary Azar and ask him yourself, why in the world waive it if you can't share it? And it's not that we're sharing it with the public, it's not that we're sharing it with that, but we are fighting.
But it's not quite that simple.
A war.
That waiver, you gotta read it detail for detail, word for word. It's meant more for hospitals.
Well, no, it speaks specifically to a hospital.
I read her section just a few minutes ago.
Okay.
It didn't give me a warm and fuzzy that this right here.
You read well, I gave y'all all my copies.
I did, I read it, and I found it online and pulled it up in the bulletin that they sent out afterwards, which is kind of a one-pager of it.
Look at the public health side of it, because it specifically talks about
Chuck needs to look at this. We need to talk to some other folks about it, because I'm not sure about this.
That's right.
I mean, this is
this the first time that you've seen it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is getting into the identifier part of it, though.
Okay.
You know, that's the question, is where are you, at what point do deviate off the path. You know, if you look at any kind of things about HIPAA, the guidance is do the minimum much as you can.
That's right.
Because then you don't step over the bounds.
Mm-hmm.
That's the question, is where's the line? At what point did I go into what they call an identifier?
Yeah.
Did I get over and say, you know, people can, as Ms. Watford said, make judgment calls about,
And I
you know,
agree,
that
we
kind of
shouldn't
thing.
share none of this, but what happens if we walk in on the EOC meeting? What happens if we're here 24 hours a day? I decide as a commissioner, I wanna be in all these meetings and be here. I can't hear that information. Knowing that I'm not gonna tell anybody, that I'm held legally just as bound as anybody else to share that public information with anybody. But what I'm hearing is, you can't sit in on that meeting, you're not privy to that information.
Well, this part here that I've bulleted down, I have seen this, a lot of this is on the state website,
Yeah.
so I know it can be pulled.
Mhm.
And we're already pulling some of it, and the hospitals needs to be added, so, Commissioner Yates, you know, asked me about that the other day, and we can add that as part of her briefing that goes out every day. And some of these are new, and some of them, like the race and gender, I've seen that on the state's website. That can be pulled, I think, and age and things like that, because those aren't specific identifiers. Any data that's aggregate about human beings is usually okay. If I'm y'all, is that not right?
No.
Well, then I'm wrong too, so I mean.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Madam Chair, is there anything else on the agenda besides this?
There is not. This was the last thing on the agenda for tonight.
Okay, we just keep running over the same material.
I think it would be
Casey had
good.
it. If Casey had it, if you've got something that you wanna, have individually, if you'll call Casey and tell him that you wanna get it, I'm sure that he'll do everything in his power to provide it for you. And at
To
the
give-
same time, he'll provide it for all the commissioners.
That's exactly right. Casey, do you hear that? I believe he summed it
You know, I
up.
apparently
You've-
just
you've heard
misspoke
the
about
concern.
aggregate data, which is fine. It happens to me all the time. So will obviously consult with Chuck and Lillian on, as I said, anything that I can get out that's within our power to do. I'm more than happy to do it. I'll be glad to do it. And I'm trying to keep everybody abreast of not just the virus issues, but everything going on that's coming down our way financially. Those are gonna be big ones, big decisions, and they're coming faster than we expect. So, I mean, obviously, you guys have seen some of the game plan. We're getting mentally prepared, but prepared for what, as Mr. Shields said, is gonna be the interesting question of the day moving forward.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Thank you all, and thank you to staff for helping us tonight. We appreciate it.
Good night.